Don't get in the car! A janitor's desperate scream saved a powerful CEO from a deadly conspiracy. But that was just the beginning. When a terrified single father risks everything to expose a medical fraud that's killing children, including his own daughter, a billionaire businesswoman must choose: ignore the truth and lose her brother, or trust a stranger and infiltrate a secret facility in a race against time. Stay with me until the end, and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. The autumn sun hung low over the glass towers of downtown, casting long shadows across the plaza, where Serena Halbrook's heels clicked against the marble with the kind of precision that matched everything else in her life. 52 years old, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent, she moved through the world like someone who had never questioned whether doors would open for her, because they always had. Behind her, the quarterly board meeting had just concluded. Another victory. Another quarter of record profits for Halbrook Industries. The pharmaceutical and biotech conglomerate she'd built from her father's modest medical supply company now employed 40,000 people across 3 continents. Forbes had called her the Iron Architect of modern medicine. The Wall Street Journal preferred the woman who won't lose. Serena didn't care much for either title. She cared about results. "The car's waiting at the south entrance, Ms. Halbrook," her executive assistant Michelle said, slightly breathless as she hurried to keep pace. Michelle was 28, brilliant, and perpetually 2 steps behind Serena's thinking, which was exactly why Serena kept her close. Someone needed to translate her decisions for mere mortals. "Cancel the Grayson dinner," Serena said without breaking stride. "Send flowers, something expensive but not apologetic. Gerald understands business." "Already done. I sent the orchids from that place in Soho you like." Serena allowed herself the ghost of a smile. Maybe Michelle was learning after all. They pushed through the revolving doors into the October afternoon. The plaza opened before them, a sprawling expanse of granite and precisely placed trees that Serena had personally approved during the building's redesign 3 years ago. Everything in her world was deliberate, calculated, controlled. Her black Mercedes S-Class waited at the curb, engine purring. Derek, her driver of 8 years, stood beside it, already moving to open the rear door. That's when everything shattered. Ma'am, don't get in the car!" The voice came from nowhere and everywhere at once, hoarse, desperate, cracking with terror. Serena's head snapped toward the sound. A man burst from a service door she'd never noticed before, sprinting across the plaza with the wild, uncoordinated panic of someone who'd forgotten how to be afraid of consequences. He was maybe 35, wearing the gray utility uniform of the building's maintenance staff. Dark hair plastered to his forehead with sweat, eyes wide and white-rimmed. His work boots slapped against the stone as he ran, one hand stretched toward her, the other clutching something against his chest. "Don't get in that car, please!" Before Serena could process what was happening, her security detail erupted into motion. Marcus Chen, 6'3", former Special Forces, paid extremely well to be paranoid, intercepted the running man with brutal efficiency. They collided 10 feet from Serena in a tangle of limbs and momentum that sent them both sprawling. Threat! Marcus's partner Jackson was already there, hand inside his jacket where Serena knew he kept his weapon. "Ms. Halbrook, step back, now." But Serena didn't move. She couldn't. Because as Marcus wrestled the stranger to the ground, the man's eyes found hers through the chaos, and what she saw there wasn't violence or madness. It was terror. Pure, desperate, world-ending terror. And something else. Something that looked almost like recognition. "Please," the man gasped as Marcus forced his face against the granite. "Please, you have to listen. The car. Don't get in the car. They're going to—" "Shut up." Marcus had his knee in the man's back now, one hand controlling his wrist with textbook precision. "Don't move. Don't fucking move." The plaza had transformed into pandemonium. People scattered. Someone screamed. Michelle was pulling at Serena's elbow, trying to move her toward the building entrance. Derek had abandoned the Mercedes, his hand on his own concealed weapon. But Serena stood frozen, staring at this stranger who was still fighting against Marcus's hold, still trying to reach her with his words, even though his body was pinned. "Security breach! I repeat, security breach!" Jackson was speaking rapidly into his radio. Plaza level, one suspect in custody. Sweep the area. Check the vehicle. Full protocol. The vehicle. The words penetrated Serena's shock like ice water. She turned to look at her Mercedes, sitting innocently at the curb, driver's door still hanging open from where Derek had abandoned it. Clear the area. The building's head of security, Mason Grant, came through the main entrance at a run, 4 additional officers behind him. Mason was 57, ex-FBI, and the only security professional Serena had ever fully trusted. His gray eyes swept the scene with the kind of cold assessment that missed nothing. Ms. Halbrook, step inside. Now. This isn't a request. But Serena was still staring at the man on the ground. He'd stopped struggling, but his eyes were locked on hers, and his lips were moving. She couldn't hear what he was saying. The plaza was too chaotic now, sirens already wailing in the distance, but she could read his lips. Bomb! There's a bomb! The world seemed to tilt. Mason, Serena heard herself say, her voice surprisingly steady. Check the car. We're all ready. Now. Check it now. Mason's eyes narrowed, but he turned without argument. Jenkins, Dawson, clear everyone back 200 feet. Nobody approaches that vehicle until bomb squad arrives. He grabbed his radio. This is Grant. I need NYPD bomb squad at Halbrook Plaza, south entrance. Possible vehicle-borne IED. Full evac protocol. The words vehicle-borne IED sent a fresh wave of panic through the crowd. People ran. The plaza emptied in seconds, leaving only security personnel, Serena, and the man still pinned beneath Marcus. Ms. Halbrook, we need to move you, Michelle said, her voice high and tight. Please. Not yet. Serena pulled her arm free. She walked toward the man on the ground, ignoring Jackson's sharp protest. Let him up. Let him breathe. Ma'am, this individual just let him breathe. Marcus glanced at Mason, who gave a tight nod. The pressure on the man's back eased slightly. He sucked in air, coughing, but his eyes never left Serena's face. Who are you? Serena asked. Noah Calder? His voice was hoarse, wrecked. I work here, 3rd shift, maintenance and janitorial. I'm nobody. But please, you have to listen to me. You're saying there's a bomb in my car. I don't know, maybe. He squeezed his eyes shut, and when he opened them again, they were wet. I couldn't let you get in. I couldn't. Not without warning you. Why would there be a bomb in my car? Because of what you know. Because of what you're going to find out. Because... He broke off, shaking his head desperately. Please just check the car. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. Arrest me, prosecute me, whatever, but if I'm right... Serena studied him. In 30 years of business, she'd learned to read people. This man wasn't a terrorist, wasn't a fanatic. He was terrified, yes, but not of her or her security team. He was terrified for her. What's your security clearance level, Mr. Calder? She asked. What? Level 2. Just building access. I clean offices at night. I'm not... How would you know about a bomb? Noah's mouth opened, closed. His eyes darted to the security officers surrounding them, then back to Serena. I can't. Not here. Not in front of... You just caused a security incident that's going to cost me $500,000 in police response and lost productivity. You will answer my questions. Ms. Halbrook. Mason was beside her now, voice low and urgent. Bomb squad's 3 minutes out. You need to be inside behind ballistic glass until they clear the scene. Answer me, Mr. Calder. How do you know? Noah's whole body trembled. Then something seemed to break inside him, some final wall of self-preservation, and the words spilled out in a desperate rush. Because I've been following the money. Your money. The grants you've been making to biomedical research. The foundation accounts. I've been piecing together fragments from the shredded documents in Dr. Shaw's office, from the files I wasn't supposed to see when I emptied his trash. I know about the trials, the real trials, not the ones in the public reports. And I know, his voice cracked, I know they're going to kill your brother. The world stopped. Everything, the sirens, the shouting security officers, the sound of vehicles screeching up to the perimeter, All of it fell away into a rushing silence that filled Serena's ears like water. What did you say? Your brother, Thomas Halbrook. He has neurosynaptic decay syndrome. You've been funding research for a cure for 3 years, $20 million to the Shaw Institute. But it's a fraud. Dr. Alistair Shaw doesn't have a cure. He never did. He's been falsifying results, and now he's planning to eliminate the evidence, including the patients, including your brother. It's happening tonight. That's why I had to stop you. If you got in that car, if you went wherever you were going, by the time you found out, it would be too late. Serena felt something crack in her chest, some carefully maintained wall she'd built around the one part of her life she couldn't control. Her brother. Her baby brother, who'd been 12 years younger, who'd followed her around like a duckling when they were children, who'd been diagnosed with NDS 4 years ago and given a death sentence wrapped in medical terminology. Thomas, who was currently in a private facility in Westchester, participating in what Serena had been assured was a revolutionary treatment protocol. Thomas, who she'd spoken to yesterday, who'd sounded tired but hopeful. You're lying. But even as she said it, she knew she didn't believe it, couldn't believe it, because this man, this janitor who'd risked everything to run screaming at her across a public plaza, had no reason to know about Thomas unless he was telling the truth. I'm not. Noah's voice was barely a whisper now. I swear to God I'm not. And I can prove it. The documents. I saved what I could, reconstructed what was shredded. It's all... He tried to move his hand, the one clutching something against his chest, but Marcus immediately tightened his grip. Don't move. It's papers. Just papers. Look, please. Mason stepped forward and carefully extracted a manila folder from inside Noah's jacket. He opened it, his trained eyes scanning the contents. His expression didn't change. Professional security personnel learned not to broadcast information, but Serena saw something flicker in his eyes. Ms. Halbrook, I think you need to see this. Sir, the bomb squad is arriving, Jackson interrupted. We need to... Serena. Mason never used her first name on duty. Never. Look at this. Now. She took the folder with hands that wanted to shake, but didn't. Years of board meetings and hostile negotiations kept them steady as she flipped it open. The first page was a patient roster. Partial, reconstructed from strips of paper that had been carefully taped back together. Someone, Noah, she realized, had spent hours piecing together shredded documents like a jigsaw puzzle. But it wasn't the painstaking reconstruction that made her blood freeze. It was the names. Thomas Halbrook, patient TH7, NDS advanced stage. Protocol. Status, terminal phase initiated. And below it, 9 more names. 9 more patients. 9 more people she'd never heard of, all marked with the same notation. Terminal phase initiated. What does that mean? Her voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. Terminal phase. What does that mean? It means they're going to kill them. Noah's voice was flat now, drained of everything except exhaustion. Shaw's been stringing you along for 3 years, faking progress reports, showing you falsified brain scans. He took your $20 million and spent it on other projects, legitimate projects he could actually complete and publish under his name. The NDS research was never real. He never intended to find a cure. He just needed your money, and he needed patients nobody would ask too many questions about. Private facility, no family visits, everything controlled through him. That's impossible. I speak to my brother every week. Does he tell you about the treatment? About what they're doing? Serena opened her mouth, closed it, because Thomas never talked about the treatment. He always changed the subject, made jokes, asked about her work. She'd assumed it was because discussing his illness depressed him. But what if it was because he didn't know what treatment he was receiving? Ms. Halbrook! The bomb squad had arrived, officers in heavy protective gear moving with practiced efficiency around the Mercedes. We need this area clear. Mason touched her elbow. Inside, now. We can continue this conversation in the security office. The car, they'll handle it. You need to see the rest of what's in that folder. They moved as a group toward the building entrance. Serena, Mason, Marcus, still gripping Noah, Jackson taking point. Michelle had disappeared, probably evacuated with everyone else. Good. What Serena needed to discuss wasn't for assistance. The security office was on the second floor, a windowless room filled with monitors showing every angle of the building's interior and exterior. Mason closed the door, sealing them in. Marcus finally released Noah, who collapsed into a chair, rubbing his wrists. "Talk," Serena said. "Tell me everything." Noah looked up at her, and she saw for the first time how young he was. Mid-30s at most, with dark circles under his eyes that spoke of too many sleepless nights. His hands trembled as he pushed his sweat-dampened hair back from his forehead. "My daughter has NDS," he said quietly. "Lily. She's 7 years old. She was diagnosed 2 years ago. Early onset, aggressive progression. The doctors gave her 18 months to live." That was... His voice cracked. "That was 24 months ago. She's dying, Ms. Halbrook. A little more every day. I've watched my baby girl forget how to tie her shoes, how to write her name, how to recognize her own face in the mirror. And there's nothing I can do. Nothing except watch her slip away." Serena felt something twist in her chest. She thought of Thomas, who'd been diagnosed at 38, who'd had a career, a life, decades of memories before NDS started stealing them away. This man's daughter was 7, a child. "I'm sorry," she heard herself say. "I'm truly sorry, but what does that have to—" "I heard about your research grant, about the Shaw Institute, about the trial for an NDS cure." Noah leaned forward, desperate intensity in every line of his body. "I tried to get Lily into the trial. I called, I emailed, I sent letters. I showed up at the institute and begged to speak to someone, anyone. They turned me away every time. Said the trial was full. Said they weren't accepting new patients. But I didn't stop. I couldn't. Because that trial is the only hope my daughter has. So you got a job here." Mason's voice was neutral, but Serena could hear the pieces clicking together in his mind. "To get access to information you couldn't access any other way. I got a job in the building where Halbrook Industries has its headquarters, yes. I thought, I don't know what I thought, that maybe I'd find something that would help me understand why Lily couldn't be part of the trial. That maybe I'd find a way to appeal to Ms. Halbrook directly, person to person, parent to parent." He laughed, a broken sound. "I'm a janitor. I clean toilets and empty trash cans. I didn't have any plan beyond just being in the same building and hoping." "But you found something." Serena was still holding the folder. She flipped to the next page, more reconstructed documents, financial transfers, research protocols, and a memo dated 2 weeks ago with a subject line that made her stomach drop. Subject: Patient Termination Schedule, Phase 1. "I found that 3 days ago," Noah said. "I was emptying Shaw's office. He keeps an office here on the 37th floor, uses it when he's meeting with your foundation board. He'd shredded a bunch of documents before leaving, but he'd done it in a hurry. He didn't use the cross-cut shredder, just the strip shredder. I could piece things back together if I was careful enough." "That's illegal," Marcus said. "Theft of confidential documents." "I don't care." Noah met his gaze without flinching. "My daughter is dying. Your laws can arrest me after I save her." "The termination schedule," Serena said. Her voice sounded strange, too calm, too controlled, like she was discussing quarterly projections instead of her brother's murder. "What does it mean?" "It means exactly what you think it means. Shaw's planning to eliminate all the patients in the trial. Make it look like the disease progressed naturally. He's already laid the groundwork in the medical records, documented rapid deterioration, treatment resistance, complications. When they die, it'll look tragic but inevitable. Just another unsuccessful trial for a terrible disease." "Why? If he's been faking results, why not just continue faking? Why kill?" "Because you're getting suspicious." Noah pulled out another sheet from the folder, a printed email exchange. Serena recognized her own words. "You sent this to Shaw's lead researcher 2 weeks ago. You were asking for raw data, independent verification of the brain scans. You wanted to bring in an outside neurologist to examine your brother." Serena stared at the email. She remembered writing it. Thomas had seemed confused during their last video call, more so than usual. She'd told herself it was just a bad day, that NDS progression wasn't linear. But something had nagged at her, some instinct she'd learned to trust in business. Shaw panicked, Noah continued. He's been running a perfect con for 3 years, but he knows he can't fake raw data that would stand up to independent review. So he decided to end the trial, terminate the patients, blame it on the disease, and then, with tragic regret, shut down the program and keep your $20 million. That's murder. That's 10 murders, Noah corrected quietly. 10 people who trusted him, who had no one else to advocate for them or question what was happening. Your brother, 9 others. And if Shaw gets away with this, the next time someone offers hope for an NDS cure, no one will believe them. Legitimate researchers will lose funding. People like my daughter will lose their only chance. The room fell silent except for the hum of electronics. On one of the monitors, Serena could see the bomb squad working around her Mercedes, their movements deliberate and cautious. Was there actually a bomb? She asked Mason. We'll know in a few minutes. But honestly, I doubt it. He was reading through more of the documents Noah had brought, his expression growing grimmer. This is about stalling you, keeping you from going wherever you were going next. What was on your schedule after the board meeting? Serena felt cold understanding wash over her. I was going to Westchester to visit Thomas. I rescheduled from yesterday because of the board meeting, but I promised him I'd come today instead. Her voice caught. He sounded scared on the phone. He said he wanted to see me. What time was your visit scheduled? 4 o'clock. An hour from now. Noah leaned forward. Look at the termination schedule, 3rd page. What does it say about patient TH7? Serena's hands were shaking now as she found the page. Her eyes scanned the clinical language, the cold efficiency of it, until she found her brother's designation. Patient TH7, Thomas Halbrook. Termination October 17, 1600 hours. Method, induce cerebral hemorrhage via medication interaction. Attending, Dr. Shaw. Witnesses. None required. Private patient, no family present. October 17th, today. 1600 hours. 4 o'clock. The exact time of her scheduled visit. He was going to do it while you were there. Noah's voice was gentle, which somehow made it worse. Make it look like Thomas had a sudden deterioration. A stroke, probably. Very tragic. These things happen with NDS, and you'd be there to witness it, to confirm that yes, it was sudden. Yes, the medical team did everything they could. You'd be Shaw's alibi and his validator all at once. Serena couldn't finish the sentence. The magnitude of it was too large, too monstrous. How did you know about today? About the car? I didn't. Not exactly. But I saw Shaw arrive at the building this morning with 2 men I'd never seen before. Ex-military types by the look of them. They went up to his office, stayed for an hour, then left. Shaw left right after them. I got into his office as soon as I could, told the day supervisor there was a complaint about the trash not being emptied properly, which gave me an excuse to be there. And I found this. He pulled out one more sheet, a timeline handwritten in what was presumably Shaw's handwriting. 1400. Confirm Halbrook departure from board meeting 1430. Intercept/delay. Halbrook en route to facility 1600. Administer protocol to patient TH7 1630. Notify Halbrook of emergency at facility 1700. Halbrook arrives. Witnesses terminal event 1800. Death certificate signed. Body released for cremation per patient wishes. He was going to stop you somehow, Noah said. I didn't know how. I thought maybe the car, maybe an accident, nothing fatal but enough to keep you away until it was too late. I couldn't be sure, but I knew. His voice broke. I knew that if you got in that car at your scheduled time, my daughter's only hope died with your brother. Because if Shaw succeeds, he walks away clean. And the Shaw Institute, the only facility currently researching NDS, closes its doors forever. No more research, no more hope. Just 10 dead patients and a lot of very understanding condolences about how terrible this disease is. Serena looked down at the documents in her hands, at her brother's name reduced to a patient designation and a termination time, at 9 other names she didn't recognize but who were someone's son, someone's daughter, someone's reason to wake up in the morning. At Lily Calder's name, penciled in at the bottom of the patient roster with a heartbreaking notation, potential Phase 2 candidate, pending Phase 1 success. Noah had been hoping his daughter would be next in line for the treatment. Instead, he discovered there was no treatment, just murder disguised as mercy. Ms. Halbrook, Mason's voice cut through her thoughts. I have bomb squad on the line. They've cleared the vehicle. No explosive devices, no tampering. The car is clean. Of course it is, Noah said dully. Shaw doesn't need bombs. He has medicine and plausible deniability. The car was just meant to delay you. Maybe a mechanical failure. Maybe just traffic. Anything to keep you from arriving at 4 o'clock. A knock on the door made them all turn. Jackson stuck his head in. Ma'am, NYPD wants a statement. They're asking if you want to press charges against... He glanced at Noah. Against the individual who caused the disturbance. Serena looked at Noah Calder. This janitor, who'd risked his job, his freedom, possibly his life to warn a stranger about a threat he couldn't prove and probably wouldn't be believed about. This father who'd pieced together shredded documents with the desperate hope of saving his dying daughter. This man who had just saved her brother's life. No charges, she said. Mr. Calder was having a mental health crisis. It's a personal matter. I'll be making a statement supporting his need for psychiatric care and expressing my gratitude that no one was hurt. Jackson blinked. Ma'am? You heard me. Draft something appropriate and get rid of the police. Tell them I appreciate their rapid response, but everything is under control. But now Jackson. He left, still looking confused. Mason closed the door again and leaned against it, his eyes moving between Serena and Noah. So, he said quietly, what are we actually going to do? We? Serena's eyebrow rose. I've worked for you for 9 years. I've read these documents. If even half of this is true, we're talking about a serial killer wearing a lab coat. So yes, we. His expression was iron. What are we going to do? Serena checked her watch. 3:17 p.m., 43 minutes until her brother's scheduled murder. We're going to Westchester, she said. We're going to walk into that facility, and we're going to remove Thomas from Dr. Shaw's care. They won't just let you take him, Noah said. Shaw has full medical authority. You signed papers giving him that authority 3 years ago when you enrolled Thomas in the trial. Without a court order, then we'll get a court order. That takes time. Days, maybe weeks. And that's assuming a judge believes you over Shaw. He's a respected physician. Noah stopped himself, but Serena finished the thought. I'm an emotionally involved family member making wild accusations. Yes, I see the problem. She paced the small room, her mind racing through scenarios, calculating odds the way she did with business deals. Mason, how many men do you have? On duty right now, 12. But if we're talking about what I think we're talking about, I can make some calls. I have contacts, people who owe me favors. I'm not asking you to do anything illegal. Good thing I'm not asking your permission. Mason's smile was grim. Someone's planning to murder your brother in, he checked his watch, 40 minutes. We have evidence of a conspiracy. That creates what my old friends at the Bureau would call exigent circumstances. Exigent circumstances don't apply to private medical facilities. They do if there's an immediate threat to life, which there is. We call this a rescue operation, not a kidnapping. He turned to Noah. You've been to the facility? No, I tried to visit once, early on. They wouldn't let me pass the front gate. Do you know the layout? Security systems? Noah hesitated, then reached into his jacket again. This time he pulled out a folded blueprint. I may have acquired the building plans. From the City Records Department. Public information. Mason took the blueprint and spread it on the desk. Public information, right. You're a resourceful janitor, Mr. Calder. I'm a desperate father. That's what makes you useful. Mason studied the blueprint, his finger tracing paths through the building. The facility is registered as a private residential care home, which means their security will be focused on keeping patients in, not keeping people out. But they'll have cameras, locked doors, staff on duty. Shaw himself is probably there now, preparing. How many people are we talking about? Serena asked. Staff? According to their licensing, they maintain a staff of 8, nurses, orderlies, administrators. But if Shaw is planning what we think he's planning, he may have sent most of them home early, fewer witnesses. So it might just be Shaw and his two military contractors. Might be. Or might be a full staff plus private security. We won't know until we get there. Mason looked up at Serena. This is your call. We can go in, but if we're wrong about any of this, your reputation is finished. Shaw will bury you in lawsuits. The board will force you out. Everything you've built. My brother is dying in 40 minutes. Serena's voice was flat, absolute. I don't care about my reputation. And if we're right, but we can't prove it? If Shaw disposes of the evidence? If it's our word against his? Then we make sure he doesn't dispose of the evidence. She turned to Noah. You said you had more documents, everything you reconstructed. Where is it? Safe deposit box, Bank of America on 53rd. But it's the same information that's in this folder, just more of it. More financial records, more emails. It proves the fraud, but it doesn't prove the murder plot. That's all internal memos and schedules that Shaw keeps close. Then we need Shaw's files from the facility, his computers, his medical records, everything. That's theft, Marcus said. He'd been silent until now, but his expression made clear what he thought of this entire situation. Breaking and entering, potentially assault if anyone tries to stop you. Ms. Halbrook, I have to advise against... Your advice is noted and rejected. Serena's tone brooked no argument. Mason, assemble whoever you need. We leave in 10 minutes. Marcus, you're with us or you're not. Choose. Marcus looked at her for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone. I'm calling my lawyer. If we're doing this, we're doing it by the book. Or as close as we can get. Fine. Noah, I'm coming with you. His voice was steady now, determined. My daughter's name is on those lists. This is about her too. You're a civilian. You have no training. You'll be a liability. I'm a janitor who knows how to be invisible in buildings where I don't belong. I know maintenance access, service corridors, places where security cameras don't point. You need me. He wasn't wrong. Serena looked at this stranger who'd crashed into her carefully ordered life and turned it inside out in the space of 20 minutes. This man who'd risked everything for a truth nobody wanted to hear. This father who loved his daughter enough to be reckless. Fine, she said. But you follow orders, my orders or Mason's. Agreed? Agreed. Then let's go steal my brother back, Mom. The drive to Westchester took 32 minutes, made in 2 vehicles. Mason's unmarked SUV carrying him, Serena, and Noah, followed by a second SUV with Marcus and 2 additional security personnel Mason had summoned with a single phone call. Serena didn't ask who they were or what Mason had told them. She'd learned long ago that there were times to demand every detail and times to trust her people to handle things. This was a time for trust. Noah sat in the back seat beside her, silent, staring out the window as the city gave way to suburbs and then to the rolling hills of Westchester County. His hands were clasped in his lap, knuckles white. Tell me about Lily, Serena said. He glanced at her, startled. What? Your daughter. Tell me about her. Not about her disease. About her. Noah swallowed hard. For a moment she thought he wouldn't answer. Then words started spilling out in a quiet rush, as if he'd been waiting for someone to ask for years. She loves butterflies, monarchs especially. We had a garden at our apartment. Just a little balcony, really, but Lily planted milkweed because she read that monarchs need it. She kept a journal of every butterfly she saw, drew pictures of them. She was going to be a lepidopterist when she grew up. That's what she told everyone. 7 years old, and she could pronounce lepidopterist perfectly. Was going to be? 2 months ago, she forgot the word. Forgot what a butterfly was called. She looked at one landing on her milkweed and asked me what the pretty flying thing was. His voice cracked. She's forgetting everything. Her mother, my wife, died when Lily was 3, car accident. So it's just been us. Just me and Lily against the world. And now I'm losing her too, and I can't... He stopped, pressing his palms against his eyes. I'm sorry. I shouldn't... Don't apologize for loving your daughter. Serena's voice was harsh, surprising herself. Don't ever apologize for that. She thought of Thomas. Of watching NDS steal him piece by piece, the way he'd called her Sarah last month, their mother's name, before catching himself with a laugh that didn't hide his terror, the way he'd asked her the same question 3 times in one conversation. The way he'd looked at her during their last video call, with eyes that still held intelligence but were shadowed with the growing darkness of forgetting. "My brother was an artist," she said quietly. "Sculptor. He worked with clay and bronze. Beautiful pieces. Museums bought them. Collectors paid 6 figures. He had this way of capturing emotion in static form. Joy, grief, love. You could feel it just looking at his work." She paused. "Last year he tried to make something. I watched him via video chat. He couldn't remember how to center the clay on the wheel, couldn't remember the basic technique he'd used 10,000 times. He cried. I'd never seen Thomas cry, not even when our parents died. But he cried that day. I'm sorry. So we understand each other, Mr. Calder. We're both fighting the same monster, just from different tax brackets." He smiled at that, a small, broken thing. "Call me Noah. I think we're past Mr. Calder." "Serena, if we're committing felonies together, we should be on a first-name basis." Mason glanced at them in the rear-view mirror. "We're not committing felonies. We're exercising a family member's right to remove a patient from inadequate care based on evidence of medical malpractice and fraud. It's legally gray, but it's not black." "Whatever helps you sleep tonight," Serena said. "I'll sleep fine. I've done worse for worse reasons." The Shaw Institute appeared around a curve in the road, a converted mansion on 20 acres of rolling lawn, surrounded by old-growth trees that provided privacy and isolation. Very exclusive, very expensive, very discreet. Exactly the kind of place where wealthy families could tuck away relatives with embarrassing conditions and forget about them with minimal guilt. Serena had picked it personally, had toured it with Shaw himself, impressed by the beautiful grounds, the attentive staff, the state-of-the-art medical equipment hidden discreetly behind elegant decor. Had written checks totaling $20 million to fund Shaw's research. Had delivered her brother into the hands of a monster. "How do you want to do this?" Mason asked as they pulled into a small rest stop half a mile from the facility, the second SUV parked beside them. "Professional," Serena said. "We're concerned family members conducting a surprise inspection. Noah, you stay with the vehicles unless we call for you. I need you ready to move if things go wrong, not caught in the middle if things get complicated. But, non-negotiable, you have a daughter who needs you alive and out of prison. Don't make me regret bringing you this far." Noah's jaw clenched, but he nodded. "Okay, but if you need me, you'll be the first call." She turned to Mason. "How many men inside?" "Camera check shows minimal activity. I count 4 heat signatures on the ground floor, three on the second. One of those second-floor signatures is in the area marked as Patient Suite 7 on the blueprint. That would be Thomas. Who else is with him? Can't tell from here. Could be a nurse. Could be Shaw himself." Serena checked her watch. 3:51 p.m., 9 minutes. "We're out of time. Let's go." They pulled up to the facility's front entrance at 3:54, the 2 SUVs looking official enough that the guard at the gate waved them through after a brief check of IDs. Serena had called ahead from the car, informing them that she was coming for her scheduled visit early and to please alert Dr. Shaw. If Shaw was thrown off his timeline, all the better. The front door opened before they reached it. A nurse, young, nervous, stood in the doorway with a professional smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Ms. Halbrook, we weren't expecting you for another 10 minutes. Dr. Shaw is with my brother, I imagine." Serena brushed past her into the foyer. "That's fine. I'll go directly to him." "Actually, if you could wait in the family lounge, I'll just—" "I'm not waiting." Serena's voice could have frozen nitrogen. "I'm visiting my brother. Now." The nurse looked helplessly at Mason and his team. 4 large men in suits following a determined billionaire probably exceeded her conflict resolution training. I'll let Dr. Shaw know you're on your way up." "You do that." They climbed the curved staircase to the second floor, Serena setting a pace just short of running. Patient Suite 7 was at the end of the hall, a large, bright room that faced the gardens. Beautiful, peaceful. A lovely place to die. The door was closed. Serena reached for the handle and found it locked. "Stand back," Mason murmured. But before he could do whatever he was planning, the door opened from inside. Dr. Alistair Shaw stood in the doorway. He was 62, distinguished, with silver hair and the kind of face that inspired trust, strong jaw, warm eyes, a smile that reached his crow's feet. He'd been on CNN, 60 Minutes, NPR discussing his groundbreaking work in neurodegenerative diseases. He'd published papers in The Lancet and JAMA. He had a wall of diplomas from prestigious institutions. He was also, Serena now understood, a psychopath. "Serena, what a wonderful surprise. You're early. I was just beginning Thomas's afternoon session." His smile was perfect, concerned, welcoming, with just a hint of apology. "I'm afraid he's had a difficult day. The treatment is progressing, but as I've mentioned, there can be regression before improvement. It's all part of the process." "Step aside, Dr. Shaw. I want to see my brother." Of course. But perhaps we should talk first about now." Something flickered in Shaw's eyes. The smile stayed in place, but there was a calculation behind it now. He was recalculating, adjusting his approach. A con man realizing the mark was asking unexpected questions. "Very well. But I should warn you, he's somewhat confused today. Don't be alarmed if he doesn't immediately recognize." Serena pushed past him into the room. Thomas lay in the hospital bed, his eyes closed, an IV line running into his arm. He looked smaller than she remembered, frailer. His dark hair had gone gray at the temples, and his face had the sunken quality of someone who'd lost too much weight too quickly. But he was alive, still breathing, still here. "Thomas." She was at his bedside in 3 strides, her hand finding his. "Tommy, it's Serena." His eyes fluttered open. For a moment they were unfocused, clouded. Then they sharpened, and she saw her baby brother looking back at her. "Ren?" His voice was weak, confused. "You're early. You said 4 o'clock. "I know. Change of plans. How are you feeling?" "Tired. Really tired. Dr. Shaw gave me something for... He trailed off, his eyes finding Shaw standing in the doorway. Something crossed his face. "Fear? He said it would help, but I feel strange." Serena's eyes went to the IV bag hanging above the bed. Clear liquid, no label, just like Noah had described from the termination schedule. "Mason," she said quietly, "remove that IV, carefully." "Miss Holbrook, what are you..." Shaw stepped forward, his professional mask slipping. "You can't just..." "I can. I am." Serena turned to face him, and for the first time since entering the room, she let her fury show. "You're done, Dr. Shaw. We know everything, the falsified research, the faked progress reports, the termination schedule. We know what you plan to do today at 4 o'clock. Shaw froze. His expression went through several rapid changes: confusion, calculation, and finally, cold assessment. The warm, trustworthy doctor vanished, replaced by something else entirely. "I have no idea what you're talking about. You're clearly under stress, which is understandable given your brother's condition. Perhaps you should sit down and save it." Mason had removed the IV line from Thomas's arm and was now photographing the IV bag with his phone. "We're taking Mr. Holbrook with us. You can cooperate, or you can explain to the police why you're objecting to a family member removing her brother from your care." "He's my patient. He's in the middle of treatment. You can't simply..." "We can. We are. If you want to stop us, call the police. I'm sure they'd be very interested in what's in that IV bag." Shaw's jaw tightened. He was trapped and knew it. But Serena could see his mind racing, looking for an angle, a way to spin this. "If you remove Thomas from my care, you'll be signing his death warrant. The treatment protocol requires precise timing. Any interruption could cause irreversible damage." "The only irreversible damage was planned for 4 p.m., Serena said coldly. "We found your schedule, Shaw. We know exactly what you were going to do." For a long moment, Shaw just stared at her. Then he smiled, a cold, utterly sincere expression that made Serena's blood run cold. "Prove it," he said softly. "I'm a respected physician. You're a grieving family member making wild accusations under stress. Who do you think they'll believe?" "We'll find out." Marcus and another security officer were already moving Thomas, disconnecting monitors, preparing him for transport. Thomas was conscious but groggy, his eyes moving between them with confusion. Ren, what's happening? I don't understand. We're taking you home, Tommy. You're safe. Everything's going to be okay. She hoped she wasn't lying. They moved as quickly as they could, but hospital beds don't fit through doorways easily. By the time they had Thomas in a wheelchair and were heading for the stairs, staff had begun to gather. 2 nurses, an orderly, a woman in administrative clothing who kept saying something about insurance liability and proper discharge procedures, and blocking the front entrance, 2 men who hadn't been there when they arrived. Large men, ex-military bearing, hands near their belts in a way that suggested concealed weapons. Shaw's contractors. Ms. Halbrook. Shaw had followed them down, his voice carrying across the foyer with practiced authority. I cannot allow you to remove a patient from this facility without proper discharge paperwork and medical clearance. It would be against all protocols and, frankly, potentially fatal for Thomas. Then call the police, Mason said, his hand inside his jacket now. We'll wait. I'm sure they'll want to hear all about your protocols. One of the contractors stepped forward. Doctor's orders, gentlemen. The patient stays. The patient, Serena said clearly, is my brother. And unless you're planning to physically assault a CEO and her security team in front of half a dozen witnesses, I suggest you step aside. The contractor looked at Shaw, who gave the tiniest shake of his head. Whatever he'd planned, a violent confrontation in his own lobby wasn't it. Too many witnesses, too many cameras. Let them go, Shaw said quietly. But Ms. Halbrook, understand this. You're ending your brother's only chance at survival. By tomorrow, he'll be declining rapidly. By next week, he'll be comatose. And when he dies, you'll know it was because of your paranoia and your inability to trust medical professionals. If he dies, Serena said, her voice like ice, I'll know it was despite your best efforts to kill him first. They moved as one unit through the doors, down the steps, toward the SUVs. Noah was already there, the vehicle running, back door open. They loaded Thomas as carefully as speed allowed, Serena climbing in beside him, cradling his hand. I'm scared, Ren, Thomas whispered. What's happening? Why do I feel so strange? You were given something you shouldn't have been, but we're getting you to a real hospital. They'll flush your system, run tests. You're going to be okay. She hoped that wasn't a lie either. As they pulled away, Serena looked back at the Shaw Institute. Shaw stood on the front steps, watching them go. He wasn't smiling anymore. His face was expressionless, cold. It was the face of a man who'd just lost $20 million and 10 potential victims. It was also the face of a man planning his next move. He's going to want to run, Mason said, his eyes on the rear-view mirror. The second we're out of sight, he's going to destroy evidence and disappear. Let him try. Serena pulled out her phone and dialed a number she had memorized but had never used. Her emergency contact with the FBI, a senior agent who'd been cultivated over years of corporate hospitality and carefully maintained relationships. Agent Morrison, this is Serena Halbrook. I need to report an attempted murder, medical fraud, and conspiracy. The perpetrator is Dr. Alistair Shaw, currently at the Shaw Institute in Westchester. I have documentation, witnesses, and a victim who's been poisoned. How fast can you get a team there? She listened for a moment, then smiled grimly. 15 minutes? Perfect. And Agent Morrison? He has 2 armed contractors with him. I'd suggest coming prepared. She hung up and looked at Noah, who was staring at her with something like awe. You have the FBI on speed dial? I have everyone on speed dial. That's what 20 years of networking gets you. She turned her attention back to Thomas, who was drifting in and out of consciousness. How far to the hospital? Mount Sinai is 23 minutes, Mason said. I've already called ahead. They're expecting us. Good. Noah, call your daughter. Tell her you're okay. What? You've been gone for hours. She'll be worried. Call whoever's watching her. Let her know you're safe. Noah's hands shook as he pulled out his phone. Serena listened to the one-sided conversation, Noah speaking to what sounded like a neighbor, his voice breaking when he asked to talk to Lily, his whole face transforming when he heard her voice. Hi, Butterfly. Yeah, Daddy's okay. I'm sorry I'm late. Something came up at work, but I'll be home soon. Did you have a good day? Really? That's wonderful, honey. Yes, I promise. I love you too, so much. Be good for Mrs. Chen, okay? He hung up, wiping his eyes. She drew another butterfly today. She said she remembered the word. Butterfly. She remembered. Maybe that's a good sign, Serena said gently. Or maybe it's just a good day. Tomorrow she might forget again. He looked at her. I'm sorry. You just saved your brother, and I'm falling apart. You held it together when it mattered. That's all anyone can ask. They rode in silence for a while, Thomas's breathing the only sound besides the road noise. Serena kept her hand in his, feeling the pulse at his wrist, steady, strong, alive. How close had they come? If Noah hadn't pieced together those shredded documents, if he hadn't been desperate enough to risk everything, if he hadn't run screaming across that plaza. Thank you, she said quietly, looking at Noah. You saved his life. I hope you understand that. Whatever happens next, whatever legal complications arise, you saved my brother's life. I just did what I had to do, what any parent would do. No, most people would have given up, would have decided the risk was too great, the odds too long. You didn't. You fought. She paused, choosing her words carefully. When this is over, when Shaw is in custody and Thomas is stable, we need to talk about Lily. Noah's head snapped up. What about her? There are other researchers, other labs working on NDS, real labs, doing real work. My foundation has connections. I don't want charity. It's not charity, it's... She stopped, frustrated. Lily was on Shaw's list. Patient roster, potential phase 2. That means she qualified for the trial under his screening criteria, which means she's eligible for legitimate trials. I can make introductions, open doors, actually use my money and influence for something that matters. Why? Noah's voice was raw. Why would you do that for us? Because you did something for me. Because your daughter deserves a chance. Because... Serena stopped, surprising herself with the truth that wanted to come out. Because I've spent 20 years building an empire, and it took a janitor with shredded documents to remind me what actually matters. Consider it payment for services rendered. Noah laughed, the sound halfway to a sob. You're paying me for committing corporate espionage and causing a security incident? I'm paying you for being the only person brave enough to tell me the truth. She held his gaze. We're going to get through this. Your daughter is going to get the treatment she needs, real treatment. My brother is going to recover, and Shaw is going to spend the rest of his life in a federal prison. That's what's going to happen. You sound very certain. I'm a CEO. Certainty is my job. She smiled, thin and fierce. Besides, I'm angry now, and I have resources. Shaw made a critical mistake. What's that? He threatened my family, and there's nothing more dangerous than a billionaire with a grudge and access to the best lawyers money can buy. Thomas stirred, his eyes opening. Ren? I'm here, Tommy. Did we leave the hospital? I can't remember. His voice was slurred, confused. Everything's fuzzy. We did. We're going to a different hospital, a better one. You're going to be okay. Shaw said, he said the treatment was working, but I felt wrong, really wrong, like I was disappearing. His grip on her hand tightened. Don't let me disappear, Ren, please. Never. She leaned close, her forehead touching his. You're staying right here with me. I'm not letting you go anywhere. The hospital rose ahead of them, white and shining in the late afternoon sun. Emergency room entrance, medical team already waiting, the machinery of salvation ready to engage. Behind them, somewhere in Westchester, federal agents were descending on the Shaw Institute. Evidence was being seized, phones were being confiscated. A man who'd spent years perfecting his con was learning what it felt like when the Mark fought back. And in the SUV, 3 people who'd been strangers this morning sat together in the quiet understanding of shared survival. A CEO who'd almost lost everything, a janitor who'd risked everything, and a dying man who'd been given a second chance. They weren't safe yet. The legal battles would be brutal. Shaw had resources, connections, lawyers of his own. The evidence would have to be verified, tested, defended in court. But they were alive. All 3 of them. And sometimes, on the worst days, that's enough to call it a victory. The fluorescent lights of Mount Sinai's emergency department burned with a sterile brightness that made everything feel both more real and more surreal. Serena stood outside the treatment room where a team of doctors worked on Thomas, her reflection ghost-like in the observation window. Behind her, Mason was on his phone coordinating with the FBI. Noah sat slumped in a plastic chair, his head in his hands, looking like a man who'd finally stopped running and felt the crash. Ms. Halbrook? A doctor emerged, pulling off latex gloves. She was perhaps 40, with tired eyes and the kind of calm competence that came from years of emergency medicine. I'm Dr. Patricia Okonkwo. I'm overseeing your brother's care. How is he? Stable. We've got him on IV fluids to flush his system. His blood work shows elevated levels of several compounds that shouldn't be there, anticoagulants primarily, along with what appears to be a calcium channel blocker at near-toxic doses. If you'd arrived an hour later... She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Serena felt her knees weaken but locked them. CEOs didn't collapse in hospital hallways. Will there be permanent damage? Too early to say. His brain scans show deterioration consistent with neurosynaptic decay syndrome, but the rate of decline isn't what I'd expect. It's almost as if... Dr. Okonkwo paused, choosing her words carefully. As if the progression was artificially accelerated. I've seen cases where medications intended to treat neurological conditions actually worsened them. It's rare, but it happens. Was his previous physician monitoring him closely? Not as closely as I thought. Serena's voice was acid. Well, we'll need to consult with a specialist, but my preliminary assessment is that some of what you're seeing might be medication-induced rather than pure disease progression, which means it might be reversible. Partially, at least. The words hung in the air like a lifeline thrown across dark water. Reversible, even partially, even a chance. What does he need? Time, monitoring. We'll keep him in the ICU overnight, possibly longer depending on his response. And I'll need a complete medical history, everything from his previous treatment, every medication, every test result. Can you get that for me? I'll have it for you within the hour. Serena pulled out her phone, already composing emails in her head. Her lawyers could subpoena the records. Her foundation's connections could expedite the process. Money and influence, properly applied, could move mountains, or at least medical bureaucracies. There's something else, Dr. Okonkwo said quietly. The FBI is here. They want to speak with you and your brother, if he's coherent enough. They said something about an ongoing investigation. Let them wait. My brother's health takes priority. Understood. But Ms. Halbrook, whatever happened today, whatever you removed him from, those compounds in his system weren't accidental. Someone was poisoning him, slowly and deliberately. The FBI needs to know everything. They will. I promise you they will. Dr. Okonkwo nodded and returned to the treatment room. Serena watched through the window as the medical team continued their work. Thomas lay still, surrounded by machines that beeped and hummed, his face peaceful in unconsciousness. For the first time in hours, she allowed herself to breathe. Ms. Halbrook, Mason appeared at her elbow. FBI's getting impatient, and we've got a problem. What kind of problem? Shaw's gone. The agents reached the facility 18 minutes after we left. They found the contractors, the staff, even the IV bag we left behind. But Shaw himself disappeared. His car's gone. His phone's off. He's in the wind. Serena's jaw tightened. He was always going to run. We knew that. Yeah, but here's the thing. He didn't just run. He took files with him, physical and digital. The agents found his office ransacked, hard drives missing, filing cabinets emptied. He grabbed everything he could carry and bolted. The evidence. Some of it, but not all. Mason's expression shifted, something almost like satisfaction crossing his face. Noah's reconstructed documents? Those are safe. We have copies. And the IV bag, the blood samples from Thomas, those are physical evidence Shaw can't destroy. Plus, the other patients are still at the facility. 9 people who can testify about their treatment, about what Shaw told them, about what they experienced. If they're coherent enough to testify. Serena's mind was already racing ahead, calculating angles. Shaw said they were scheduled for termination. He might have already started the process with some of them. The FBI's medical team is evaluating them now, but yeah. That's the concern. Mason lowered his voice. And there's something else. Shaw's not working alone. The financial records Noah found show payments to at least 3 other people, one administrator at the facility, one research assistant, and someone listed only as LC with a contact number that's now disconnected. Shaw had accomplices. Then we find them before they scatter. Serena turned to find Noah still sitting in his chair, staring at nothing. Noah, I need you. He looked up, eyes red-rimmed. What? The documents you reconstructed, the financial records. Can you identify any of Shaw's associates from them? Maybe. There were names on some of the transfers, email addresses, but I didn't have time to trace all of them. You'll have time now, and resources. Whatever you need, forensic accountants, private investigators, IT specialists, you'll have it. We're going to find everyone involved in this. Noah stood slowly, unfolding from the chair like a man who'd aged 10 years in 10 hours. Why? Shaw's the one who matters. He's the one who... Shaw's the architect, but he had construction workers, people who knew what he was doing and helped anyway. They all need to answer for this. Serena's voice was cold, absolute. My brother almost died today. Your daughter is dying because people like Shaw take money meant for cures and spend it on fraud. I'm not letting anyone involved walk away. You sound like you're declaring war. I am. On medical fraud, on corruption, on every piece of shit who puts profit over patients. Shaw started this. I'm finishing it. Mason cleared his throat. That's great and all, very inspirational, but the FBI agents are literally heading this way. You need to decide what you're telling them. The truth, all of it. Even the parts where we technically committed breaking and entering, theft of medical records, and removal of a patient against doctor's orders? Especially those parts. We had evidence of an imminent threat. We acted in good faith. Our lawyers will frame it as a rescue operation, not a crime. Serena smoothed her suit jacket, composing herself. Let them come. I've dealt with tougher interrogations from the SEC. The agents arrived in a pair, a man and a woman, both in their 40s, both with the sharp-eyed competence of career law enforcement. The man introduced himself as Agent Morrison, the one Serena had called. The woman was Agent Chen, his partner. Ms. Halbrook, thank you for your cooperation, Morrison said. His voice was professionally neutral, giving nothing away. We need to take your statement about the events at the Shaw Institute. Is there somewhere private we can talk? They ended up in a hospital conference room, the 4 of them around a cheap laminate table. Serena, Mason, Morrison, and Chen. Noah had been taken to a separate room to give his own statement. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead like insects. Start from the beginning, Morrison said, pulling out a digital recorder. How did you first become aware of Dr. Shaw's activities? Serena told them everything. Noah's desperate warning on the plaza, the reconstructed documents, the termination schedule, the infiltration of the facility, every detail laid out with the precision she usually reserved for board presentations. She didn't minimize their actions or try to spin them. Just facts, cold and clear. Chen took notes throughout, her pen scratching against paper. When Serena finished, both agents were silent for a long moment. That's quite a story, Morrison said finally. And you have evidence to support it? Physical documents, photographs, the IV bag from my brother's room, blood samples currently being analyzed by this hospital's lab, 9 potential victims still at Shaw's facility, and witness testimony from multiple sources. Serena met his gaze steadily. Plus whatever your own team found when they searched the Institute. This isn't speculation, Agent Morrison. This is documented, provable medical fraud and attempted murder. Murder's a strong word. What would you call administering toxic medications disguised as treatment with the intent to cause death? I'd call it something we need to prove in court. Which brings me to my next question. How did Noah Calder obtain these documents? You mentioned he worked as a janitor at your building. He found them in trash that had been improperly disposed of. He reconstructed shredded documents using publicly available techniques. Nothing he did required unauthorized access to secured systems or spaces. He stole confidential medical research. He recovered documents from waste disposal. There's a legal distinction. Serena leaned forward. Agent Morrison, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking this is a billionaire throwing her weight around, making wild accusations to cover up her own guilt in funding a failed research project. You're thinking maybe I'm trying to blame Shaw for my own poor oversight. Am I close? Morrison's expression didn't change, but Chen's pen stopped moving. I'm thinking, Morrison said carefully, that we have a situation where a wealthy family member forcibly removed a patient from a medical facility based on information obtained through questionable means, and now that patient is in intensive care. I'm thinking that whatever Dr. Shaw may or may not have done, your actions today created a legal gray area that a good defense attorney will absolutely exploit. Then it's a good thing I have better attorneys. Serena's smile was sharp. My lawyers are already preparing a brief. By tomorrow morning, you'll have a comprehensive legal argument for why our actions constituted a lawful rescue operation under exigent circumstances. You'll also have signed statements from Thomas, once he's coherent, detailing his treatment at Shaw's facility. And you'll have cooperation from me, my company, and my foundation in pursuing every lead related to this case. In exchange for immunity for Noah Calder, complete and absolute. He's a father who discovered a crime and reported it to the authorities through the only means available to him. He's not a criminal, he's a whistleblower. Chen spoke for the first time, her voice crisp and analytical. Whistleblower protections don't typically extend to theft of confidential documents and causing security incidents that resulted in bomb squad deployment. They do when the documents expose attempted murder and the security incident was the only way to prevent an imminent death. Serena's voice hardened. I'm not negotiating here, Agent Chen. Noah Calder saved my brother's life. If you try to charge him with anything, I will make it my personal mission to ensure that every news outlet in the country knows how the FBI harassed a grieving father who exposed medical fraud while the actual criminals went free. Shaw is already gone. Your best witnesses are Noah and the documents he recovered. You need him cooperative, not hostile. Morrison and Chen exchanged a glance. Some communication passed between them, the silent language of partners who'd worked together long enough to have shorthand. We'll need to review the evidence, Morrison said finally. All of it, and we'll need access to your brother, to the other patients at Shaw's facility, and to any financial records related to your grants to the Shaw Institute. You'll have everything. I'll personally ensure full cooperation. And Noah Calder remains available for questioning. He's not going anywhere. His daughter is sick. He has every reason to stay put and see this through. Morrison nodded slowly. Then here's how this works. We take your statements, we analyze the evidence, and we build a case. If everything checks out the way you say it does, we'll recommend immunity for Calder and focus our resources on finding Shaw and his accomplices. But if we find out you're lying, if any of this is fabricated or exaggerated, I will personally ensure that everyone involved faces charges, including you, Ms. Halbrook. Wealth doesn't buy you immunity from obstruction of justice. I wouldn't expect it to. Serena stood, extending her hand. We have a deal. Morrison shook it, his grip firm and assessing. We'll be in touch. Don't leave the state without notifying us. I'm not going anywhere. My brother needs me. The agents left, taking their recorder and notes with them. Mason waited until the door closed before letting out a long breath. That went better than I expected. They don't have a choice. Shaw running makes him look guilty, which supports our version of events. They need us more than we need them right now. Serena checked her phone. 17 missed calls, 43 emails, 6 text messages marked urgent. The board was panicking. Her executive team was demanding answers. The press had gotten wind of something and was circling like sharks. I need to make some calls. You need to sleep. I'll sleep when Shaw's in custody and Thomas is stable. Until then, her phone rang, cutting her off. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her thumb the accept button. Serena Halbrook. Ms. Halbrook, I think we should talk. The voice was cultured, calm, instantly recognizable. Dr. Alastair Shaw. Serena's hand tightened on the phone. Mason saw her expression and immediately started gesturing. Keep him talking. Trace the call. She nodded. Dr. Shaw, I'm surprised you'd call me directly. Most wanted fugitives try to avoid contacting their victims. Victim? Shaw laughed, the sound rich with genuine amusement. My dear Serena, you're not a victim. You're a very wealthy woman who made a poor investment and is now trying to blame me for your own lack of due diligence. It's actually rather predictable. You tried to murder my brother. I tried to ease his suffering. There's a difference. Thomas has months, perhaps weeks before NDS renders him completely non-functional. What I offered was a peaceful end before the real horror began. You should be thanking me. Serena's vision went red at the edges, but she kept her voice level. Where are you, Shaw? Somewhere your FBI friends won't find me. I have resources you don't know about, connections you can't trace. By this time tomorrow, I'll be in a country without an extradition treaty, living quite comfortably on money you helped provide. He paused. I'm calling as a courtesy, to explain why your little crusade is pointless. Try me. You can't prove attempted murder. The medications I prescribed were all FDA approved, all within acceptable dosage ranges, all documented in proper medical charts. If Thomas had an adverse reaction, well, that's a tragic complication of his underlying disease. Any competent lawyer will argue that I was trying to help, and any negative outcomes were unforeseeable. You kept a termination schedule with specific times and methods. Did I? Because the agents who searched my office found no such thing. What they found were the clinical notes of a dedicated physician dealing with a difficult disease. What you found were reconstructed fragments assembled by a janitor with no medical training and a clear agenda. Which story do you think plays better in court? Mason was on his own phone now, frantically typing. Trying to trace the call, Serena realized. Keep him talking. What about the other patients, the 9 people still at your facility? What about them? They're receiving the best care available for their condition. If some of them decline rapidly, and with NDS, that's always a possibility, it'll be tragic but explainable. You're grasping at straws, Serena. I have financial records showing you diverted grant money. You have accounting records that show money was spent on legitimate research expenses. The fact that those expenses weren't directly related to NDS research doesn't constitute fraud. It constitutes academic freedom in allocating resources. Again, any decent lawyer will tear your case apart. Serena felt ice forming in her stomach. He'd thought this through. Every angle covered, every piece of evidence contaminated or explained away. He wasn't running because he was guilty and panicked. He was running because it was the smart move, the play that kept him ahead while his legal team cleaned up behind him. You won't get away with this. I already have. Your brother's alive, which means no murder charge. The other patients are alive, which means no mass murder charge. All you have is a civil case about misappropriated funds, which my lawyers will settle for a fraction of what you paid me, wrapped in an NDA that prevents you from discussing it publicly. You'll get some money back, I'll pay a fine, and life goes on. That's how these things work in the real world. Not this time. Yes, this time. Because you're not the first wealthy person I've disappointed, and you won't be the last. Rich people are always shocked when they discover their money can't buy miracles, but they get over it. You will too. You're not listening, Shaw. I'm not going to sue you for my money back. I'm going to destroy you. Every license you have, every affiliation, every piece of professional credibility, gone. You'll never practice medicine again. You'll never publish research again. I'm going to make sure your name becomes synonymous with fraud and malpractice. Good luck with that. Shaw's voice was amused, infuriatingly confident. I've been in this business for 30 years. I have friends in places that matter. You have money, but money isn't everything. Reputation, connections, institutional support, those matter more. And in a fight between a grieving family member making emotional accusations and a respected researcher defending his work, the institutions always protect their own. We'll see. Yes, we will. Enjoy your brother while you can, Serena. I give him 6 months before NDS takes him completely. And when it does, remember that I offered him peace, and you chose suffering instead. That's on you. The line went dead. Serena stood frozen, the phone still pressed to her ear, rage and helplessness warring in her chest. Mason touched her arm gently. The trace failed. Call was routed through multiple VPNs, probably using a burner phone. We got nothing. He's right, isn't he? Serena's voice was hollow. Everything he said about the evidence, about how this plays out in court. He's right. Maybe, but he's also arrogant. Arrogant people make mistakes. Mason took the phone from her hand. And we're not done gathering evidence. The FBI is just getting started. Noah's documents are just the beginning. We'll find more. Will we? Or will we find exactly what Shaw wants us to find? A paper trail that shows a dedicated doctor who did his best with a terrible disease and had some unfortunate outcomes. I don't know. But I know you don't give up. That's not who you are. Serena wanted to believe him, wanted to feel the certainty that usually drove her forward, the absolute confidence that she could win any fight if she just worked hard enough and thought smart enough. But Shaw's voice echoed in her head, and for the first time in 20 years she felt the cold touch of doubt. The conference room door opened. Noah stood there looking even more exhausted than before, his eyes haunted. "They're done with me," he said quietly. "For now. They said they'd want to talk again once they've analyzed the documents." He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "I heard your phone call. The walls are thin." "Then you heard how screwed we are." "I heard him trying to convince you to give up. That's different." Noah sat down heavily. "My wife, before she died, she used to say that the only way to guarantee failure is to stop trying. It's a cliché, I know, but she meant it. She fought for every day she had left, even when the doctors said there was no point. She fought because that's what you do when you love someone." "Your wife was fighting a disease. I'm fighting a system." "Same thing, really. Systems are just diseases in organizational form." Noah leaned forward. "Shaw thinks he's won because he's covered his tracks legally, but legal isn't the same as safe. We can't put him in prison? Fine. We make sure everyone knows what he did. We make sure no one ever trusts him again. We make sure his name is poison in every medical community. That's its own kind of justice. Public campaigns can be fought in court too. Defamation, slander. Only if what we say is false. If it's true, it's protected speech." Noah pulled out his phone, showing her a social media screen. "I've been documenting everything since I started finding those documents. Personal blog, no company affiliation, just a father sharing his journey. It's legally protected as long as I stick to facts and my own experiences. Shaw can't touch it without proving what I said is false. And if he tries, it just draws more attention." Serena stared at the screen. Noah's blog was simple, almost crude, just text and a few photos of Lily from better days. But the latest post, dated today, told the story of the Shaw Institute. Not accusations, just questions. Why did a promising NDS trial produce no published results in 3 years? Why were patients kept isolated from family? Why did financial records show grant money going to unrelated research projects? How many followers do you have? 43, last time I checked. Mostly other NDS families. People desperately looking for hope. Noah's voice was quiet but determined. "It's not much, but it's a start. And if you shared it, if it went viral, if the story got picked up by medical journalists and patient advocacy groups, Shaw's lawyers would bury me in lawsuits. Maybe. Or maybe they'd back off because fighting it would create more publicity. Streisand effect." Noah met her gaze. "I'm going to tell my story, Ms. Halbrook, with or without your support. Because even if Shaw gets away legally, even if he disappears to some beach in a country without extradition, people need to know. Other families need to be warned. That matters more than money or reputation." Serena looked at this janitor who'd stumbled into her life hours ago and turned it upside down. This man who'd lost everything except his determination to protect his daughter. This father who understood, in a way her executives and lawyers never would, that some fights weren't about winning in the traditional sense. They were about making sure the next person had a better chance. "I'll do more than share your blog," she said slowly. "I'll fund a campaign, patient advocacy, medical transparency, research accountability. We'll create a foundation specifically focused on exposing medical fraud and supporting victims. We'll hire investigators, journalists, lawyers, anyone we need to tell this story properly and legally. That'll cost millions. I've got millions. And unlike Shaw, I'm going to use them for what they were meant for." Serena felt something shift inside her, the paralysis of doubt giving way to the familiar clarity of purpose. Shaw thinks he's won because he's covered his legal exposure, but he's forgotten something important. What's that? "I'm not just a victim. I'm a CEO with resources he can't match and patients he can't outlast. He can hide in his beach house and feel safe, but every day he's gone, we'll be here, building a case. Not just a legal case, a social one, a professional one. We'll make sure every potential patient knows his name, every ethics board, every medical journal, every licensing authority. We'll make him infamous. Mason was nodding. Public pressure works where legal pressure fails. It's slower, but it's effective. And it can't be appealed or dismissed. Exactly. Serena felt the familiar surge of competitive energy, the thing that had driven her to build an empire from nothing. Shaw wants to play the long game? Fine. I'm better at the long game than he is. By the time we're done, he'll wish he'd stayed and faced prison. At least prisoners eventually get out. You're talking about destroying a man's life, Noah said quietly. I'm talking about justice for your daughter, for my brother, for 9 other patients who trusted Shaw and almost died for it. Don't confuse that with revenge. Isn't it both? Probably. But I'm okay with that. Serena stood, feeling solid ground under her feet again. Shaw thinks wealthy people give up when things get complicated. He's wrong. Wealthy people fight differently than poor people, but they fight just as hard when it matters. He's about to learn that. Noah stood as well, squaring his shoulders. Then I'm with you. Whatever you need, whatever it takes. Lily deserves a world where people like Shaw don't get away with this. She does. They all do. Serena extended her hand and Noah shook it. A pact between a billionaire and a janitor, sealed in a hospital conference room at 10 o'clock at night, while somewhere a doctor-turned-fugitive thought he'd escaped justice. He was wrong. The fight was just beginning. 3 days later, Serena stood in the underground parking garage of Halbrook Industries at 2 a.m, watching Mason's team prepare for what she refused to call a heist, but couldn't quite call anything else. The concrete walls absorbed sound, making every footstep echo like a judgment. 6 men and 2 women moved with quiet efficiency, checking equipment, reviewing blueprints spread across the hood of an unmarked van, speaking in the clipped shorthand of people who'd done dangerous things together before. Noah stood beside her, looking simultaneously terrified and determined. He'd spent the last 72 hours working with a forensic accountant Serena had hired, tracing every dollar Shaw had touched, mapping every connection. The accountant, a woman named Rita Chen, who charged $800 an hour and was worth every penny, had found things even Noah's painstaking reconstruction had missed. Shell companies, offshore accounts, a network of financial deception that stretched across 3 continents and involved at least 7 other people. But the most damning evidence, the files that would prove intent, that would show Shaw had knowingly falsified research and planned patient terminations, those were still in Shaw's possession. Digital files on servers the FBI couldn't touch without a warrant they didn't have grounds to obtain yet. Physical files in locations Shaw had kept secret from everyone except his most trusted accomplices. And one location in particular, a storage facility in New Jersey registered under a shell company controlled by LC, the mysterious accomplice from Noah's reconstructed documents. Rita had traced LC to a woman named Linda Cortez, Shaw's former research director who'd left the institute 6 months ago under mysterious circumstances. Her employment record showed a substantial severance payment. Her social media showed a woman who'd stopped posting around the same time she left Shaw's employ. And her name appeared on a lease for a climate-controlled storage unit that cost more per month than most people's mortgages. Whatever Shaw was hiding, Rita believed it was there. The problem was getting to it without committing crimes that would invalidate any evidence they found. Hence this gathering in the middle of the night, with Mason's contacts and their very specific skill sets. "Walk me through it one more time," Serena said. Mason pointed to the blueprint. "The facility is on Route 3, small operation, maybe 50 units total. Security is minimal, cameras at the entrance and exit, 1 guard on duty overnight, electronic locks on the units. We've identified 3 potential problems. First, the cameras. We can't disable them without it being obvious, so we work around them. Angela here," he gestured to a woman in her 30s with short dark hair, "will enter as a legitimate customer using a prepaid rental on a unit 3 doors down from Cortez's. That gives us a reason to be on camera. She's checking on her belongings at an odd hour. It happens." "And the guard?" "Distraction. Michael will arrive 15 minutes before Angela, report his car making a strange noise in the parking lot. The guard comes out to look, stays engaged with car trouble while we work. By the time he returns to his post, we're already inside. The electronic lock on Cortez's unit? That's where it gets technical. Mason nodded to a younger man, maybe 25, who looked like he'd be more at home in a tech startup than a midnight operation. James is a security consultant. He's going to clone Angela's legitimate access credential and modify it to open Cortez's unit. Takes about 90 seconds if you know what you're doing. Which is illegal, Noah said quietly. Noah, unauthorized access to a secured facility. Which is why Angela's rental is in my name, Mason replied. And why James's security consulting firm has a very specific contract with your foundation, Ms. Halbrook, to assess vulnerabilities in storage facilities used by medical research organizations. We're conducting an authorized security audit. If we happen to discover improperly secured medical documents during that audit, well, that's a compliance issue, not a crime. Serena studied the faces around her. You've all done this before. We've all done things that required creative interpretation of the law, Mason corrected. For legitimate purposes. This isn't our first time recovering evidence that someone wanted hidden. And if something goes wrong, if the guard calls the police, if Shaw somehow knows about this location and has it under surveillance, then Angela and James are there conducting a legitimate security audit. I'm providing security for a client who has reason to fear retaliation, and you and Noah were never here. Mason's expression was grim. But I don't think Shaw knows we've connected him to Cortez. He's focused on the FBI investigation, uncovering his tracks from the official investigation. He doesn't know about Rita, doesn't know we've traced his financial network. We have a narrow window while he thinks he's safe. Unless Cortez warned him. We've been monitoring her phone and email. Rita obtained her passwords through completely legal social engineering, called her pretending to be from the storage facility's corporate office, said there was a billing issue, got her to verify her account details. Cortez hasn't contacted Shaw in 3 days. Last communication was before we started digging. She doesn't know we're coming. Serena looked at Noah. You don't have to do this. You've already done more than anyone could ask. You have Lily to think about. That's exactly why I have to do this. Noah's voice was steady despite his fear. If we don't stop Shaw, if we don't expose what he did, there'll be another facility, another fraud, another group of desperate families who lose everything to a lie. I can't let that happen. Not if I can prevent it. You could lose custody of your daughter if this goes wrong. If you're arrested, then Mrs. Chen will take care of her until I get out. I've already talked to her, made arrangements. He met Serena's gaze without flinching. Some things matter more than safety. My daughter's going to grow up in a world where I either fought for what was right or I didn't. I want her to be proud of me, even if she doesn't remember why. The words hit Serena harder than she'd expected. Thomas was upstairs in a private room on the hospital's executive floor, sleeping under observation, his brain slowly recovering from Shaw's poisoning. He'd been lucid for longer periods over the last 2 days, enough to tell the FBI about his treatment, about the confusion and fear he'd felt as medications he couldn't identify made him sicker instead of better. Enough to squeeze Serena's hand and whisper, "Thank you for coming for me. Some things matter more than safety." "All right," she said, "let's go steal some evidence." The drive to New Jersey took 45 minutes through empty streets, the city sleeping around them. Serena rode in Mason's SUV, Noah beside her, both of them silent, with anticipation. Behind them, the rest of Mason's team followed in 2 additional vehicles, maintaining careful distance, looking like nothing more than late-night commuters. The storage facility appeared around a curve in Route 3, exactly as unprepossessing as Rita's research had indicated. Single-story concrete building, harsh sodium lights casting everything in sickly orange chain-link fence with a rolling gate. The sign read, "Secure Space Storage, 24/7 Access," in fading letters that suggested the owner had stopped caring about marketing years ago. Perfect for hiding things you didn't want found. They parked at a diner 2 blocks away, watching on Mason's laptop as Angela drove up to the facility entrance and punched in her access code. The gate rolled open. Her car disappeared inside. On the screen, grainy security footage showed her parking near Unit 47, 3 doors down from Unit 44, Cortez's unit. "She's in position," Mason said. "Michael, you're up." The young man who'd been introduced as Michael drove past the facility once, then circled back and pulled into the entrance, his car's hazard lights flashing. On the security feed, they watch the guard, heavy set, late 50s, moving with the enthusiasm of someone who was 3 hours into a boring shift, emerge from his booth and walk toward Michael's car. Hooks in the water, James murmured, fingers flying across his own laptop. Guard's radio is on channel 7, standard security frequency. I've got it locked. If he tries to call for backup, I'll know before he does. Is that legal? Noah asked. Monitoring public radio frequencies? Absolutely. Acting on what I hear? Gray area. James grinned. But I'm not acting on it. Just listening. That's totally legal. Serena watched the screen as Michael got out of his car, popped the hood, and started gesturing at the engine. The guard leaned in, clearly offering advice. Classic car trouble, the universal language of men killing time. We've got maybe 10 minutes, Mason said. Let's move. They approached on foot, moving through shadows where the sodium lights didn't reach. The facility's fence was decorative more than functional, 8 feet of chain link that did nothing to stop someone determined. But they didn't need to jump it. Angela's access code worked on the pedestrian gate too. Inside, the facility was a maze of identical units, rolling metal doors painted industrial gray, numbers stenciled in white. The air smelled of concrete dust and motor oil. Somewhere in the distance, Michael's voice carried as he thanked the guard for looking at his engine, asked about good mechanics in the area, spun the conversation out as long as possible. Unit 44 sat in the middle of a long row, indistinguishable from its neighbors. Angela was already there, her unit's door rolled up just enough to show boxes inside, providing cover for what they were really doing. James knelt by Cortez's lock, some kind of electronic device pressed against the keypad. 60 seconds, he whispered. The system's reading my device as a valid credential. I'm just telling it which door to open. Can they trace this back to Angela's rental? Serena asked. Not without pulling detailed logs, which they won't do unless someone reports a break-in. And if they do pull logs, it'll show Angela's credential was used twice at the timestamp. Once for her unit, once for this one. Clerical error in the system. Happens all the time. No one will question it unless they have reason to be suspicious. The lock clicked. James pulled the device away and tucked it into his jacket. We're clear. You've got 8 minutes before the guard finishes with Michael and returns to his station. After that, we're on borrowed time. Mason rolled the door up just high enough for them to duck under. Motion sensor lights flickered on inside, revealing a 10 by 10 space packed with file boxes, plastic storage containers, and 2 metal filing cabinets. Everything was labeled with dates and codes that meant nothing to Serena, but made Noah suck in a sharp breath. These are Shaw's research archives, he said, moving to the nearest box and pulling off the lid. I recognized the labeling system from his office. This is everything. Decades of work. Start photographing, Mason ordered. Every page of every document you can find. Prioritize anything related to the NDS trial or to patient records. Angela, help him. James, you're on lookout. Serena, with me. Serena had expected to feel guilt about this, about breaking into someone's storage unit and rifling through their belongings. But as she opened the first filing cabinet and saw what was inside, the only thing she felt was cold, crystalline rage. Patient files. Dozens of them, each one labeled with a name, a diagnosis, and a date range. And beside each name, handwritten notes in Shaw's distinctive script. Patient deceased, natural progression. Family satisfied with care provided. No autopsy requested. Patient transferred to hospice. Terminal decline. No further contact. Patient expired during treatment. Complications from underlying condition. Estate settled confidentially. Over and over, the same story. Patients who'd come to Shaw desperate for hope, who'd died under his care, whose families had been convinced it was just the terrible inevitability of their diseases. No one had questioned. No one had demanded investigations. Because Shaw was respected, credible, a doctor with impeccable credentials and a comforting bedside manner. Mason, Serena said quietly, we need to photograph every single file in here, every page. This isn't just about Thomas. This is about dozens of patients over years. How many years? Serena checked the dates on the files. The oldest was from 15 years ago. At least 15, maybe more. He's been doing this for his entire career. Noah appeared at her elbow, his face ashen. I found the NDS files. Thomas is in here. So are the 9 other current patients. But there are more, previous patients from earlier trials. Ms. Hallbrook. Some of these people died 5, 7, 10 years ago. The families never knew. They're going to know now. Serena pulled out her phone and started photographing pages, her hands steady despite the fury building in her chest. This wasn't medical fraud. This was serial murder disguised as compassionate care. Shaw hadn't just run one fake trial. He'd built an entire practice around exploiting the dying and their desperate families. 4 minutes, James called from the doorway. Guards wrapping up with Michael. We need to speed this up. They worked in frantic silence, phones flashing as they documented everything they could reach. Angela had found boxes of financial records, ledgers showing payments from families, from insurance companies, from research grants. All of it meticulously recorded, because Shaw was arrogant enough to think no one would ever look, or smart enough to know that good records provided cover if questions were ever asked. 2 minutes. We need to go. Now. Just a few more. Noah was photographing a box of correspondence, letters from grateful families thanking Shaw for his care, for his compassion, for making their loved ones' final days peaceful. Letters that made Serena want to vomit because every word was based on a lie. Now, Noah, Mason's voice was hard. We can come back if we need to, but if that guard sees us, everything we've found becomes inadmissible. They rolled the door down and locked it, James's device making the electronic system think nothing had ever been disturbed. Angela secured her own unit and walked casually toward her car, as if she'd just finished checking on belongings she'd stored months ago. The rest of them moved quickly but not frantically through the shadows, back through the pedestrian gate, back into the darkness beyond the facility's lights. Behind them, the guard returned to his booth, completely unaware that anything unusual had happened. They regrouped at the diner, spreading laptops across a booth in the back while a tired waitress brought coffee. No one drank. The photographs uploaded to a secure cloud server Rita had set up, each image automatically backed up in 3 separate locations, each backup encrypted and protected by passwords only Serena and Rita knew. We got about 40% of what was in there, James said, reviewing the files on his screen. Maybe 1,500 pages of documents, give or take, patient records, financial ledgers, correspondence. It's not everything, but it's substantial. Is it enough? Noah asked. For what? Mason replied. To prove Shaw's a fraud? Absolutely. To prove he committed murder? That's harder. These files show a pattern of patients dying under his care, but cause of death is always listed as complications from their underlying diseases. Without autopsies, without toxicology reports from the time of death, we can't prove he killed them. But we can prove he falsified research results, Serena said, studying a page on her own phone. Look at this. A letter from a medical journal rejecting one of Shaw's papers because the data didn't match their peer reviewer's analysis. Shaw wrote back claiming the reviewers had made errors, but the original submission is here too, and the numbers don't match. He changed the data after receiving criticism and resubmitted it as if nothing had happened. That's academic fraud, not murder. It establishes pattern of behavior. It shows Shaw is willing to falsify data to get the results he wants. Combined with the patient files, with Thomas's testimony, with the termination schedule Noah found, it builds a circumstantial case. Serena looked up at Mason. Will it be enough to convict him? I don't know, but it'll be enough to destroy his reputation, and maybe that's what matters right now. Serena's phone buzzed. Text message from Rita. Found something. Call me. She stepped outside into the pre-dawn cold, the parking lot empty except for their vehicles and one 18-wheeler whose driver was sleeping in the cab. Rita answered on the first ring. Tell me you're sitting down, Rita said without preamble. I'm standing in a New Jersey parking lot at 3 a.m, having just committed what might technically be breaking and entering. Hit me with more bad news. It's not bad news, it's complicated news. I found Shaw. Serena's grip on the phone tightened. Where? That's the complicated part. He's not in a non-extradition country. He's in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania? That's 2 hours from here. Why would he? It's because he's not running away from the investigation. He's preparing for it. Or I tracked his financial movements over the last 3 days. He's hired a legal team out of Philadelphia, 3 criminal defense attorneys who specialize in medical malpractice and fraud. He's rented a house in Bucks County under an LLC, and he's been meeting with someone repeatedly at a property owned by yet another shell company. I can't see who, but the meetings are scheduled, regular. He's not panicking. He's strategizing. He's preparing to fight. He's preparing to win. The legal team he hired? They've never lost a medical fraud case, ever. Their specialty is getting charges dismissed before trial on technical grounds. They're that good. Serena felt something cold settle in her stomach. Can they get Shaw off? If the FBI's case relies solely on the evidence they collected from his facility, plus testimony from patients whose memories are compromised by neurological disease, yeah, they probably can. They'll argue that Shaw made judgment calls in good faith, that complications happen in medicine, that desperate families sometimes misinterpret treatment decisions. They'll paint Shaw as a dedicated doctor facing an emotionally driven witch hunt from a wealthy family who can't accept that some diseases don't have cures. Even with the files we just found? Especially with the files you just found, if they can get them excluded as evidence. Illegally obtained documents aren't admissible unless they were discovered in the course of a legitimate investigation. Your security audit cover is clever, but Shaw's lawyers will tear it apart. They'll argue you targeted Cortez's unit specifically, that the audit was a pretext for a fishing expedition, and they'll probably be right. So we just risked everything for nothing? I didn't say that. I said they'd try to exclude the evidence. Whether they succeed depends on how the FBI uses it. If they can independently verify what you found, if they can get warrants based on probable cause developed through other means, then your documents become supporting evidence rather than primary evidence. Different legal standard. How long would that take? Months, maybe a year. Shaw's lawyers will drag out every procedural step, file every possible motion, exhaust every delay tactic. By the time this goes to trial, if it goes to trial, Shaw will have spent that whole time looking like the victim. Persecuted physician, wealthy family throwing its weight around, tragic misunderstanding. That's the narrative his lawyers will push. And juries love that narrative. Serena closed her eyes, feeling exhaustion wash over her in waves. So we can't win. I didn't say that either. I said you can't win in court. Not quickly, not cleanly, but there are other ways to win. Rita paused. Have you considered going public? Not just through Noah's blog. I mean really public, national media. Network news, investigative journalism. Shaw would sue for defamation, only if what you say is false. If you stick to provable facts that Shaw took $20 million for NDS research that produced no published results, that multiple patients died under his care, that financial records show grant money was diverted to other projects, that your brother was given medications that nearly killed him, that's all defensible. You'd need good lawyers, and Shaw would still sue, but you'd win. Eventually. Eventually isn't good enough. Other families are making decisions about their loved one's care right now. They need to know about Shaw immediately. Then you accept the risk. You go public. You get sued. You spend years in litigation. But Shaw's reputation is destroyed in the process. Even if he wins in court, he loses in the court of public opinion. No patient will ever trust him again. No institution will ever hire him. No journal will ever publish him. That's its own kind of justice. Serena thought about Thomas, sleeping in his hospital bed, slowly recovering from poisoning he'd trusted Shaw to protect him from. She thought about Lily Calder, a 7-year-old girl who might not live to see 8, who'd been counting on Shaw's research to save her. She thought about the files they'd just photographed, the dozens of names, the families who'd lost people they loved while Shaw collected their money and falsified his research. Set up the media contacts, she said. Everyone you can think of. I want to tell this story to anyone who'll listen. You're sure? Once you do this, there's no taking it back. Shaw will come after you with everything he has. Let him come. I've been fighting hostile takeovers and board rebellions for 20 years. A disgraced doctor with a good legal team doesn't scare me. All right, I'll start making calls. But Ms. Halbrook, one more thing. Shaw's been making calls too. To someone at the FDA, to someone at the National Institutes of Health, to people with influence over medical research funding and regulation. He's not just preparing a legal defense, he's preparing a counteroffensive. Whatever you're planning, he's going to see it coming. Good. Let him see it coming. Let him know exactly what's about to hit him. Maybe it'll keep him awake at night the way Thomas's nightmares keep me awake. She hung up and returned to the diner. Mason, Noah, Angela, and James were still hunched over laptops, sorting through the hundreds of photographs they'd taken, organizing them into categories: patient records, financial documents, correspondence, research data. The work of building a case from fragments. "We need to go back," Noah said as she slid into the booth. "There's too much we didn't get. Files we didn't even open. If we could have another hour." "We're not going back." Serena's voice was flat. "Shaw knows where that unit is. If he doesn't know we've been there yet, he will soon. Going back would be stupid and dangerous. But the evidence is already enough for what we need. Rita found Shaw. He's in Pennsylvania preparing for a legal fight. We're not going to win this in court, at least not quickly. So we're taking it public. Everything we found tonight goes to investigative journalists, patient advocacy groups, medical ethics boards. We're going to make Shaw's name so toxic that no patient ever trusts him again." "That'll take time," Mason said. "Shaw's lawyers will fight back. They'll demand retractions, file injunctions, tie you up in litigation for years. Then we fight for years. I've got time and money. What I don't have is patience for watching Shaw walk away clean while families keep trusting him with their dying loved ones." Serena pulled up Rita's text message and forwarded it to the group. "He's 2 hours away. We know where he is. The FBI knows where he is. He's not running anymore, which means he thinks he can win. Let's show him he's wrong." Angela spoke up for the first time since they'd returned. "I know someone. Investigative journalist for the Philadelphia Inquirer. She specializes in medical fraud, institutional corruption. She'd kill for a story like this. Contact her, today. I want Shaw to wake up tomorrow and see his face on the front page." "It doesn't work that fast. She'll need to verify. Then we give her everything she needs to verify quickly. Patient records, financial documents, testimony. We make it easy for her. We gift wrap the story and hand it over with a bow." Serena looked around the table at these people who'd spent the last 3 days becoming her army. "Shaw thinks wealth and connections protect him. They do, in court. But they're also his weakness. The higher you climb, the harder you fall, and Shaw's been at the top of his field for 30 years. The fall from that height? It's going to be spectacular." Noah was staring at his phone at a photo of Lily he'd taken weeks ago. In the picture, she was holding a butterfly that had landed on her finger, her face lit with wonder and joy. A moment of happiness captured before the disease stole it away. "I want Shaw to know what he did," Noah said quietly. "Not just that he committed fraud. I want him to know that real people suffered because of his greed, that my daughter is dying because he took money meant for a cure and spent it on his own career instead. I want him to understand that." "He won't." Mason's voice was gentle but firm. "People like Shaw don't think that way. They rationalize. They convince themselves that what they did was justified, that the ends justified the means, that no one really got hurt. You'll never make him feel guilty." "Then I'll settle for making him feel scared." Noah looked up, his eyes hard. "Shaw wanted to disappear to some beach and live comfortably on stolen money. Fine, we can't stop that legally, but we can make sure that for the rest of his life, he looks over his shoulder, that he wonders if today's the day someone recognizes him, that he can never practice medicine again, never publish research again, never feel safe in the identity he built. That's not justice, but it's something." Serena reached across the table and gripped Noah's hand. "It's more than something, it's accountability, and right now that's all we can promise." The sun was rising as they drove back to the city, painting the sky in shades of gold and amber. Serena watched the light spread across the landscape and thought about all the mornings Thomas had missed while sedated in Shaw's facility, all the sunrises Lily might never see if they didn't find a real cure. The weight of it pressed on her chest like a physical thing, making it hard to breathe. Her phone rang. "Hospital," she answered immediately. "Ms. Halbrook, this is Dr. Okonkwo. Your brother is awake and asking for you. His cognitive function is significantly improved this morning. I think you'll want to hear what he has to say." 20 minutes later, Serena stood in Thomas's hospital room, watching her brother sit up without assistance for the first time in 3 days. Color had returned to his face. His eyes were clear, focused. "Ren," he said, his voice stronger than she'd heard it in months. "I remember." I remember everything Shaw did. Tommy, you don't have to. Yes, I do. I remember the medications he gave me. I remember telling him they made me feel worse, made my thoughts fuzzy, made everything harder. And I remember him telling me it was just the disease progressing, that the confusion was natural, that I needed to trust him. Thomas's hands clenched the blanket. He was poisoning me, wasn't he? Making me sicker so I'd decline faster, making it look like the disease was winning. We think so, yes. We found files that suggest I want to testify against him. In court, in the media, anywhere you need me. I want everyone to know what he did. Thomas met her gaze, and Serena saw determination there. The same stubborn will that had driven him to become an artist despite their father's insistence on business school. Shaw took 2 years of my life. 2 years I could have spent making art, spending time with people I love, actually living instead of slowly dying in his facility. I'm getting those years back. However long I have left, I'm getting them back, and I'm using them to make sure he pays. Serena felt tears threaten, but blinked them away. You're getting better. Dr. Okonkwo says the cognitive improvement is remarkable. Whatever Shaw was giving you, stopping it has helped. Because it was never just the disease, it was the cure that was killing me. Thomas laughed, a bitter sound. I trusted him. We all did. The other patients, are they okay? The FBI is evaluating them. Some are showing improvement like you. Others... She couldn't finish the sentence. How many did he kill? Thomas asked quietly. Before us? Before you figured it out. How many people died trusting Shaw? We don't know for sure. Dozens, maybe. Over many years. Thomas closed his eyes, his face twisting with emotion. Then we're the lucky ones. We survived because you didn't give up. But all those others, they died alone in his facility, thinking they were being cared for, never knowing they were being murdered. We're going to make sure people know. We're going to tell everyone. Good. Thomas opened his eyes, and they were fierce. Then let's get started. Call whoever you need to call. I'll talk to anyone who'll listen. Shaw wanted me dead and silent. He's going to get me alive and loud. Serena smiled, feeling something loosen in her chest. Her baby brother was back, damaged, still sick, with an uncertain future, but present, fighting, alive. Welcome back, Tommy, she said softly. We've got work to do. The story broke on a Tuesday morning, 6 days after they'd photographed Shaw's files in that New Jersey storage unit. Serena was in her office on the 42nd floor when Rita called with 3 words that changed everything. It's live. The Philadelphia Inquirer's website loaded on Serena's screen, and there it was, above the fold, with a headline that pulled no punches. Prominent neuroscientist accused of decades-long medical fraud. Patients died while doctor profited. The article, written by Angela's contact, a journalist named Karen Reeves, who'd spent the last 5 days verifying every detail, laid out the case with devastating precision. Shaw's name appeared in the first sentence. His photo, professional and distinguished in his white coat, sat beside testimonials from families whose loved ones had died under his care. Thomas's statement was there, describing medications that made him sicker instead of better. Financial records showed money diverted from research grants to personal projects. And buried in the middle of the article, a single paragraph that made Serena's breath catch. Dr. Shaw could not be reached for comment. His attorney, Robert Kellerman of Kellerman and Associates, issued a statement denying all allegations and announcing the firm's intention to pursue legal action against anyone who repeats these categorically false and defamatory claims. The FBI declined to comment on whether Shaw is under investigation. Serena's phone started ringing before she'd finished reading. Board members, her executive team, other journalists who'd seen the story and wanted confirmation, denial, elaboration. She ignored them all except one call, from Mason. Shaw's lawyer just held a press conference, Mason said without preamble. Turn on cable news. Any channel. She switched to MSNBC. Robert Kellerman stood behind a podium, silver-haired and immaculate, in a suit that probably cost 5 figures, radiating righteous indignation. Behind him stood Shaw himself, looking every inch the wounded professional. Concerned expression, hands clasped, the very picture of a man unjustly accused. Dr. Shaw is the victim of a coordinated campaign of harassment and defamation, Kellerman was saying, his voice rich with conviction. A grieving family member, unable to accept the limitations of modern medicine, has weaponized her wealth and influence to destroy a dedicated physician's reputation. The so-called evidence consists of stolen documents, manipulated financial records, and testimony from patients whose judgment is compromised by neurological disease. This is not justice. This is a witch hunt. A reporter shouted a question. What about the patient who claims Dr. Shaw was poisoning him? Thomas Halbrook suffers from advanced neurosynaptic decay syndrome, a disease that causes confusion, paranoia, and false memories. His sister, Serena Halbrook, has admitted to removing him from Dr. Shaw's care against medical advice. The subsequent deterioration in his condition is tragic but predictable. NDS patients often experience periods of seeming clarity followed by rapid decline. The family is misinterpreting a temporary fluctuation as evidence of poisoning, when in reality they've denied Thomas the very treatment that could have helped him. Bastard, Mason muttered over the phone. He's flipping the narrative, making you the villain and Shaw the victim. Another reporter. What about the financial irregularities in Dr. Shaw's research grants? There are no irregularities. Dr. Shaw received funding for neurological research, which encompasses multiple projects and diseases. The allocation of funds across various research initiatives is standard practice in academic medicine. Ms. Halbrook's foundation made a grant with broad parameters, and Dr. Shaw used that funding appropriately. Her current objections stem from her dissatisfaction with the pace of progress on one specific project, not from any actual misuse of funds. Serena watched Shaw standing there, his expression sorrowful and dignified, and felt rage building in her chest like a physical force. He looked like a man wronged, like someone who dedicated his life to helping people and was being crucified for it. The reporters were eating it up. She could see it in their faces, in the tone of their questions. The story was already shifting from doctor commits fraud to wealthy CEO attacks respected physician. In another 24 hours, Shaw would be the sympathetic figure and she'd be the villain. Her office door opened without a knock. Michelle stood there, tablet in hand, expression grim. You need to see this. Twitter's exploding. Half the medical community is defending Shaw. They're calling the article irresponsible journalism, accusing Reeves of publishing without proper verification. She verified everything. They don't care. Shaw's got colleagues vouching for him, professional organizations issuing statements of support, patients from other trials saying he saved their lives. It's a full-court press, and it's working. Michelle held up the tablet. You're trending, not in a good way. Serena scanned the tweets. The hashtag #StandWithShaw was already gaining traction. Doctors she'd never heard of were posting about the dangers of wealthy families interfering with medical decisions. Patient advocacy groups were releasing statements about the importance of trusting healthcare professionals. And threaded through it all, a narrative that painted her as a grieving sister who couldn't accept reality and was lashing out at the nearest target. Her phone rang again. Phone. Noah, this time. She answered. They're calling me a thief, he said, his voice shaking. Shaw's lawyers are saying I stole confidential documents and violated patient privacy. They're threatening to press charges. Ms. Halbrook, I can't go to jail. Lily needs me. If they won't. Shaw's lawyers are bluffing. They're trying to scare you into silence. Serena kept her voice steady, authoritative. Don't respond to anything. Don't talk to any reporters. Refer everyone to our legal team. You're protected. Am I? Because it doesn't feel like it. It feels like we started a war we can't win. Wars take time. We knew this wouldn't be easy. Easy? They're destroying my reputation. My name is in that article. Shaw's lawyers are already doing research on me. What if they find out about the storage unit? What if they can prove we broke in? They can't prove anything. Angela's rental was legitimate. The security audit was legitimate. Everything we did had legal cover. Legal cover isn't the same as legal. Noah's voice cracked. I'm a janitor who went after a respected doctor. Who's going to believe me over him? Serena didn't have an answer to that, because the truth was, not many people would. The public loves stories about scrappy underdogs taking on powerful institutions, but only when the underdog won. When the underdog got crushed, people looked away and pretended they'd never cared. Don't give up, she said. Not now. We're just getting started. It doesn't feel like we're getting started. It feels like we're getting finished. He hung up before she could respond. Serena stood there, phone in hand, watching Shaw's press conference continue on the television. Kellerman was fielding questions with practiced ease, turning every accusation into evidence of persecution, every piece of evidence into a misunderstanding. Shaw stood silent and dignified, occasionally nodding sadly, the very picture of a man bearing his cross with grace. Mason appeared in her doorway. "We've got a problem. The FBI just issued a statement. They're investigating allegations of medical fraud at the Shaw Institute, but they emphasized, and I quote, the investigation is ongoing and no charges have been filed. All individuals should be presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. It's the most non-committal statement possible. They're hedging their bets. They don't want to commit to prosecuting Shaw until they're sure they can win. Which means Shaw's legal strategy is working. He's creating enough doubt, enough noise, that even the FBI is backing off." Mason came into the office and closed the door. "Rita's hearing rumors that some of Shaw's patients at the facility are recanting, saying they were confused, that Shaw never did anything wrong, that the whole thing is a misunderstanding. He's gotten to them, threatened them, or paid them, or convinced them. Probably all three. And we can't prove it because those conversations happen in private with Shaw's lawyers present, which means they're privileged." Mason sat down heavily. "I've been in a lot of tough situations. I've seen operations go sideways, but I've never seen someone flip a narrative this fast or this effectively. Shaw's lawyers are good, really good. So we need to be better." "How?" "Every move we make, they counter. Every piece of evidence we present, they explain away. We're playing catch-up, and catch-up doesn't win." Serena's phone buzzed. Text from Rita. "Check your email. Emergency." She pulled up her email on her computer. Rita had sent a single attachment, a legal document. Serena opened it and felt her stomach drop. It was a lawsuit. Filed that morning. Alistair Shaw, MD, plaintiff. Serena Hallbrook, defendant. Counts included defamation, tortious interference with business relationships, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and civil conspiracy. Damages sought, $50 million. "He's suing me," she said flatly. "Of course he is. It's the next logical move. Sue you, tie you up in discovery, force you to spend years and millions defending yourself. Even if he loses, he wins by making the fight too expensive to continue. $50 million. Plus legal fees, which will be another few million at least. Shaw's trying to make this so costly that you give up. Walk away. Accept a settlement that includes an NDA and a statement that you were mistaken in your allegations." "I'm not walking away." "I know, but your board might make you. They're not going to want Hallbrook Industries dragged through years of litigation over your brother's medical care. They'll pressure you to settle, and if you refuse, they might force you out." Serena thought about the board meeting she'd have to face, the shareholders who'd demand explanations, the executives who'd whisper that she'd let this get personal, that she'd compromised the company's interests for family drama. Mason was right. The pressure to fold would be enormous. Her door opened again. This time it was Thomas, walking slowly but steadily, Mason's assistant hovering protectively behind him. He'd checked himself out of the hospital that morning against Dr. Okonkwo's advice, insisting he needed to be here, needed to fight. "I saw the press conference," Thomas said. "Shaw's calling me delusional, saying I'm confused because of the disease." "You are confused because of what he did to you. I know that. You know that. But everyone watching doesn't know that. They see a sick man making accusations and a respected doctor denying them. Who's more credible?" Thomas crossed to her desk and picked up a framed photo. The two of them at his last gallery opening 5 years ago, before NDS had stolen his future. "I need to do an interview, television, face-to-face. Let people see me, hear me, judge for themselves whether I'm delusional." "Tommy, Shaw's lawyers will rip you apart. They'll ask you questions designed to confuse you, to make you look unreliable. Then I'll answer them. I'm still me, Ren. The disease hasn't taken everything yet, and I'd rather spend what I have left fighting than hiding. It's too dangerous. Everything's dangerous now. Shaw's already destroyed my reputation. He's calling me a paranoid patient who can't accept reality. The only way to counter that is to show people I'm neither paranoid nor unable to accept reality. I'm a man who was poisoned by his doctor and survived to tell the truth. Mason cleared his throat. He's not wrong. Right now you're fighting on Shaw's terms, in legal arenas where he has the advantage. But public opinion? That's different territory. If Thomas can tell his story effectively, if people connect with him, see him as a real person instead of a legal abstraction, it changes the dynamic. And if he can't, if the interview goes badly, if he has a cognitive slip on camera, then we're no worse off than we are now. Shaw's already painting him as unreliable. An interview that goes poorly just confirms what Shaw's saying, but an interview that goes well, that shows Thomas lucid, coherent, credible, that's a game changer. Serena looked at her brother, seeing the determination in his eyes, the stubborn set of his jaw that she remembered from when they were children and he'd insist on climbing trees despite their mother's warnings. Thomas had always been the brave one, the one willing to take risks while she calculated odds. Okay, she said, but we choose the interviewer carefully, someone fair, someone who'll ask tough questions, but not hostile ones. And we prepare. You practice answers to every question Shaw's lawyers will want asked. I'll practice. But Ren, I'm not doing this to win some public relations battle. I'm doing this because people need to know. Other families who are trusting Shaw right now, who are where we were a week ago, they need to know before it's too late for them too. The interview was scheduled for that evening with a local news anchor named Patricia Wong, who'd built a reputation for fairness and follow-through. Rita had vetted her thoroughly. No ties to Shaw, no obvious bias, a track record of giving both sides equal time. The interview would air live at 6 during the evening news, when viewership would be at its peak. They spent the afternoon preparing. Rita grilled Thomas with every hostile question she could think of. How do you know you weren't just having normal disease progression? Isn't it possible you're misremembering? Why should people believe you over a doctor with decades of experience? Thomas answered each one patiently, coherently, never losing his temper or his focus. At 5:30, they arrived at the television station. Thomas looked pale but composed in the suit Serena had bought for him that afternoon. Nothing too expensive, nothing that screamed wealth, just a simple outfit that said, ordinary person telling the truth. The makeup artist did minimal work, just enough to keep him from looking washed out under the lights. Patricia Wong met them in the green room. She was 50-ish, with sharp eyes and a handshake that inspired confidence. Mr. Halbrook, I want to be clear about what this interview is and isn't. I'm not here to prosecute or defend Dr. Shaw. I'm here to let you tell your story and to ask the questions viewers would want answered. Some of those questions will be uncomfortable. If at any point you need to stop, we stop. Understood? Understood. But I won't need to stop. I want people to hear everything. The set was small, intimate. 2 chairs, a plain background, lighting that was meant to feel conversational rather than confrontational. Serena watched from the control room as Thomas and Patricia took their seats as the director counted down from 10, and then they were live. Good evening, I'm Patricia Wong, and tonight we're speaking with Thomas Halbrook, a patient at the center of allegations against prominent neuroscientist Dr. Alistair Shaw. Mr. Halbrook, thank you for being here. Thank you for having me. You have neurosynaptic decay syndrome, a degenerative brain disease. Can you tell us what that's like? Thomas nodded slowly. It's like drowning in slow motion. Every day, pieces of who you are just slip away. Memories, skills, words, things you've known your entire life suddenly become foreign. I'm an artist. I've worked with clay and bronze for 25 years. 6 months ago, I couldn't remember how to center clay on a wheel. The knowledge was just gone. That must be terrifying. It is, which is why when Dr. Shaw said he was conducting a trial for a treatment, I jumped at the chance. I would have done anything for hope. And you participated in his trial for 3 years. I did. My sister funded the research, $20 million to find a cure for NDS. I was patient number 7. Dr. Shaw says the treatment was legitimate, that your condition simply progressed despite his best efforts. What's your response? Thomas leaned forward slightly. Dr. Shaw was giving me medications that made me worse, not better. I told him repeatedly that I felt confused, that my thoughts were foggy, that I couldn't focus. He said it was the disease. But within days of stopping his medications, my head cleared. I could think again. Dr. Okonkwo at Mount Sinai analyzed my blood work and found compounds that shouldn't have been there, anticoagulants and calcium channel blockers at near-toxic doses. Shaw wasn't treating my disease. He was creating symptoms that looked like disease progression. Why would he do that? Because my sister was paying him to produce results. When you're researching a fatal disease and you're not making progress, you have two choices: admit failure and return the money, or fake progress and keep the funding. Shaw chose to fake it, and when my sister started asking for independent verification, he decided to end the trial before she could discover the truth, by killing the patients. Patricia's expression didn't change, but Serena saw her pause, weighing how to proceed. That's a serious accusation. Dr. Shaw's attorney says you're confused, that NDS affects memory and judgment. NDS affects memory, yes. But I remember everything from the last 3 years with perfect clarity, because it was traumatic. I remember being afraid. I remember feeling like I was losing myself faster than the disease should have taken me. I remember Shaw standing over my bed with an IV bag, telling me it was medication to help, when really it was poison disguised as treatment. Dr. Shaw has many colleagues vouching for him, patients who say he saved their lives. How do you explain that? I don't doubt that Shaw has done good work in the past. Sociopaths often do. They're charming, credible, respected. That's how they get away with what they do. But I'm not talking about his entire career. I'm talking about what he did to me, to 9 other patients in the NDS trial, and possibly to dozens of others over the years. Just because someone does good things doesn't mean they're incapable of terrible things. Patricia glanced at her notes. We reached out to some of Shaw's former patients from the facility. Several said they were treated well, that Shaw was compassionate and professional. One said, and I quote, "Dr. Shaw gave my husband dignity in his final days." How do you respond to that? Thomas's expression softened. I'm glad those families had good experiences. Truly. But some of us didn't. Some of us were part of a trial that was fraudulent from the beginning. And the families of the patients who died under Shaw's care, they deserve to know the truth about what happened. They deserve to know that their loved ones might have lived longer if Shaw had been actually trying to help, instead of covering up his failure. What do you want people watching to understand? Thomas looked directly into the camera, and Serena felt her throat tighten. I want them to understand that trust is a powerful thing. When you're dying, when someone in a white coat says they can help, you believe them. You have to believe them, because hope is all you have. Shaw used that trust as a weapon. He took people at their most vulnerable and exploited them for money and reputation. And the worst part? He'll probably get away with it because the system protects people like him. Respected doctors with powerful lawyers and institutional support. But even if he gets away legally, people need to know what he did. Future patients need to be warned. That's why I'm here. Not for revenge, for warning. The interview continued for another 20 minutes. Patricia asked about the storage unit, about Noah's involvement, about whether Serena's wealth had influenced the investigation. Thomas answered everything calmly, never defensive, never evasive. He admitted when he wasn't sure about something. He acknowledged that some of his memories might be affected by NDS, but he never wavered on the core facts. Shaw had poisoned him, Shaw had planned to kill him, and Shaw needed to be stopped. When it ended, Serena met Thomas backstage. He looked exhausted, drained, like the interview had taken every ounce of energy he had. But he was smiling. How did I do? You were perfect. She hugged him carefully, mindful of how fragile he still was. You told the truth. That's all we could ask. Shaw's lawyers are going to come after me now. You know that. Let them come. You told your story. They can't take that back. Her phone was already buzzing with responses. Twitter was exploding again, but this time the tone was different. People were quoting Thomas's words, sharing the interview clips, questioning Shaw's narrative. The hashtag #BelievePatients was trending. Medical ethicists were weighing in, talking about the power dynamics between doctors and patients, about the importance of listening when patients report adverse effects. It wasn't victory, not yet, but it was momentum. Rita called as they were leaving the station. You need to see this. Shaw's giving another press conference right now. They watched it on Mason's phone in the parking lot. Shaw stood alone this time, no lawyer beside him, speaking directly to the cameras with the wounded dignity of a martyr. "I've dedicated my life to helping people," he said, his voice thick with emotion. 30 years of research, thousands of patients treated, countless families given hope. And now I'm being destroyed by accusations from one family who can't accept the limitations of medicine. Thomas Halbrook is a sick man. I feel compassion for him, but his illness has affected his judgment, and his sister has weaponized his confusion to attack me. I will fight these allegations in court. I will clear my name. But the damage is done. My reputation, built over decades, has been destroyed in days. That's not justice. That's a witch hunt. A reporter asked, "What about the financial records showing diverted grant funds?" Research budgets are complex. Funds are allocated across multiple projects, multiple initiatives. Miss, Halbrook's foundation made a broad grant for neurological research. I used that funding appropriately, as audited by independent accountants. Her current objections are a retroactive attempt to control how grant money was spent, which is not how research funding works. What about the termination schedule found in your office? Shaw's expression didn't waver. I have no knowledge of any such document. It's possible that Mr. Calder, the janitor who allegedly found it, fabricated it. It's possible he misunderstood something he saw, but I can state categorically that I never created any document planning patient terminations. That's absurd. What about the IV bag that was tested? Medications prescribed for Mr. Halbrook based on his condition at the time. If those medications had adverse effects, that's tragic but not criminal. Medicine is not an exact science. We make our best judgments with the information available. Sometimes those judgments are wrong. That doesn't make us murderers. He was good, Serena thought distantly. Every answer reasonable, every explanation plausible. To someone who didn't know better, who hadn't seen the files, who hadn't watched Thomas nearly die, Shaw sounded like a dedicated professional being unfairly persecuted. The press conference ended. Shaw walked away from the cameras with his head high, a man wronged but unbowed. He's going to win, isn't he? Noah's voice came from behind them. Serena turned to find him standing there, looking hollowed out and defeated. He's going to convince people that we're lying, that we fabricated everything, and he's going to walk away clean. Maybe. Serena was too tired to lie. Or maybe we've done enough. Maybe we've planted enough doubt that patients will think twice before trusting him. Maybe that's all we can accomplish. That's not enough. Not for Lily, not for Thomas, not for all the people who died before we figured out what Shaw was doing. I know, but sometimes you don't get justice. Sometimes you just get survival. Noah looked at her with something like betrayal in his eyes. You're giving up. I'm being realistic. Shaw has better lawyers, more support, and a legal system that favors him. We're fighting uphill with evidence that's questionable at best and inadmissible at worst. Thomas did a great interview, but one interview doesn't counter decades of professional reputation. We hurt Shaw. We damaged him, but we didn't destroy him, and that might have to be enough. It's not enough for me. Noah's voice was hard, determined. I didn't risk everything to hurt Shaw. I risked everything to stop him, and I'm not done. He walked away before Serena could respond. Mason watched him go, then turned to Serena. He's going to do something stupid. Probably. Can you stop him? Do you want me to? Serena thought about it. About Noah's desperate love for his daughter, about his willingness to risk everything for a chance at justice, about how that kind of recklessness could either change everything or destroy what little they'd gained. No, she said finally. Let him fight. God knows someone should. That night, Serena couldn't sleep. She stood in her penthouse apartment, 50 stories above the city, watching lights flicker in windows where other people were living their uncomplicated lives. Her phone sat on the table beside her, dark and silent, now that the media feeding frenzy had moved on to other stories. Shaw's lawsuit sat on her desk, $50 million of weaponized paperwork. Her lawyers were already drafting responses, preparing for years of depositions and motions and appeals. The board had called an emergency meeting for tomorrow morning. She'd probably be asked to step down as CEO, at least temporarily, to protect the company from the PR nightmare. Everything she'd built, threatened by one doctor's fraud, and her decision to fight it. Thomas was asleep in the guest room, his breathing steady through the door she'd left cracked open so she could hear him. He'd fought so hard today, given everything he had to tell his truth. And it might not matter. Shaw's counter-narrative was already taking hold. Within a week, people would forget. Within a month, it would be just another he said, she said legal battle that ground on forever without resolution. Her phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. You should stop before people get hurt. Serena stared at the message. Threat or warning? And from who? Shaw? His lawyers? Someone else entirely? She deleted it and turned her phone off. Outside, the city glittered in the darkness, indifferent to justice, indifferent to truth, indifferent to everything except the endless cycle of night and day. Somewhere out there, Shaw was sleeping comfortably, confident in his lawyers and his narrative and his belief that he'd already won. Maybe he had. But morning would come anyway, and with it, whatever Noah was planning, whatever desperate move a father would make when the system failed his daughter. Serena hoped it would be enough. She hoped they'd all survive it. Noah didn't call ahead. He didn't ask permission. At 3 a.m, 48 hours after Thomas's interview aired, he drove a borrowed pickup truck to the address Rita had given him, the house in Bucks County where Shaw was hiding. The property sat at the end of a long gravel drive surrounded by woods that swallowed sound. No neighbors, no witnesses. Just Shaw and whatever private security he'd hired with Serena's stolen money. Mason sat in the passenger seat, gun holstered under his jacket, expression unreadable. When Noah had shown up at his apartment at midnight with a plan that was either brilliant or suicidal, Mason had asked one question. Are you doing this for justice or revenge? Noah had answered honestly. Both. Mason had grabbed his keys. They parked a quarter-mile away and approached on foot through the trees. The house was a rental, mid-century modern with too much glass and not enough cover. Lights burned in the living room despite the hour. Through the windows, Noah could see Shaw pacing, phone pressed to his ear, gesturing angrily. Still fighting, still convinced he'd win. 2 guards, Mason whispered, pointing. One at the front door, one patrolling the perimeter, both armed. This is your last chance to back out. I'm not backing out. Then we do this smart. No heroes, no stupidity. We get what we came for and we leave. Agreed? Agreed. Mason pulled out his phone and made a call. Angela, we're in position. Start the diversion. He hung up and checked his watch. 3 minutes. That's how long we have before the guards realize it's a fake emergency call and come back. 3 minutes to get inside, find what we need, and get out. What if Shaw has the files locked up, encrypted? Then we improvise. But Rita thinks he's arrogant enough to keep physical copies. Old school, that's what we're banking on. They waited in the shadows, Noah's heart hammering so hard he was sure the guards would hear it. Somewhere in the distance, sirens wailed. Angela had called in a report of a major accident on the highway 2 miles away. Multiple vehicles, possible fatalities, the kind of thing that would pull every cop in the area. The kind of distraction that bought precious minutes. One of Shaw's guards answered his phone, listened, then ran for the front door. He knocked urgently. Shaw appeared, looking alarmed. The guard spoke rapidly. Shaw grabbed a coat and keys. Within 90 seconds, both guards and Shaw were in a car, racing toward the reported emergency, leaving the house empty. Now, Mason said. They moved fast. The back door had a standard deadbolt that took Mason 18 seconds to pick. Inside, the house was sterile and temporary, rental furniture, nothing personal, the anonymous space of someone passing through. Shaw's laptop sat open on the dining table, screen dark but not locked. Papers were scattered beside it, file boxes stacked against the wall. Noah went straight for the boxes while Mason downloaded everything from the laptop onto a portable drive. The first box contained legal documents, Shaw's lawsuit against Serena, depositions, correspondence with his attorneys. The second box had financial records, decades of them, meticulously organized. And the third box, buried at the bottom, had what they'd come for. Patient files. Not the sanitized versions Shaw had submitted to medical boards, but the real ones. Handwritten notes and margins. Actual outcomes versus reported outcomes. A spreadsheet listing patient names, dates of death, and beside several entries, a simple notation, accelerated. Mason, Noah breathed. I've got it. This is everything. This proves, photograph it. Fast. We've got 90 seconds before they realize the accident was fake. Noah's hands shook as he pulled out his phone and started photographing pages. Each image was damning, proof that Shaw had been falsifying records for over a decade, proof that he'd deliberately hastened patient deaths, proof of exactly what he'd been doing and how long he'd been getting away with it. 60 seconds. Noah photographed faster, not caring about quality now, just capturing everything. The spreadsheet, the notes, the patient files with their terrible notations. His phone's memory filled. He switched to Mason's phone, kept shooting. 30 seconds. We need to go. Now. Just a few more. Now, Noah! They ran. Out the back door, across the lawn, into the trees just as headlights swept up the driveway. Shaw's car. The guards had figured it out faster than expected. Noah and Mason pressed themselves against tree trunks, barely breathing, as Shaw stormed into the house, shouting about false reports and wasted time. They made it back to the truck and were a mile away before Shaw would have even thought to check if anything was disturbed. Noah's hands were still shaking, adrenaline crashing through his system like electricity. "Did we get enough?" he asked. "We got everything. The laptop download alone is probably enough to bury him, but the patient files, those are the nuclear option." Mason was driving fast but not recklessly, just another vehicle on an empty highway. Rita needs to see these immediately. Tonight. Before Shaw realizes what happened and tries to destroy the originals. They drove straight to Rita's office in Manhattan, arriving at 4:30 in the morning. She was already there, because apparently forensic accountants didn't sleep. She took one look at the files on Noah's phone and her eyes went wide. "Where did you get these?" "Don't ask questions you don't want answers to," Mason said. "I'm asking anyway, because if these were obtained illegally—" "They were photographed in plain view during a security consultation," Noah said, the lie coming easier than he'd expected. Shaw hired Mason's firm to assess his rental property's security vulnerabilities. "We discovered documents that appeared to be improperly secured medical records. As mandatory reporters aware of potential criminal activity, we documented what we found." Rita stared at him, then at Mason, then back at the phone. "That's the most creative interpretation of mandatory reporting I've ever heard. It won't hold up under serious scrutiny." "It doesn't have to hold up forever, just long enough to get these in front of the FBI and the media." Noah leaned forward. "Can you verify them? Prove they're authentic?" "Give me 4 hours and access to my full database. I can cross-reference the patient names with death certificates, match the financial records to Shaw's known accounts, verify the handwriting against known samples. If these are real, and they look real, this is prosecutorial gold." "Then get started. I need to make a call." Noah stepped outside and dialed Serena's number. She answered on the second ring, voice rough with sleep or lack of it. "Noah? It's 4:30 in the morning. What?" "We got them. Shaw's real files. Everything he's been hiding. Rita's verifying now, but it's all there. Proof of fraud, proof of falsified records, proof that he's been doing this for years." Silence. Then, "How did you get them?" "The less you know, the better. But they're legal enough to use, trust me." "I stopped trusting people's definitions of legal enough about a week ago. Where are you?" "Rita's office. Can you get here? We need to decide how to use this." "I'll be there in 20 minutes. She arrived in 15, Thomas with her despite the hour. He looked exhausted but alert, that same determination from the interview burning in his eyes. They gathered around Rita's conference table as she pulled up documents on 3 different screens, explaining what they were seeing. These patient files show a pattern going back at least 15 years. Shaw would enroll patients in experimental trials, collect insurance payments and research grants. Then when the trials failed to produce results, he'd falsify data to show improvement. When patients' families started asking questions, he'd accelerate their decline using medication interactions. Then he'd report their deaths as natural progression of disease. "How many patients?" Serena's voice was hollow. "At least 47 that I can verify. Probably more. He's been careful. Never too many deaths at once, always spread out over time, always with plausible medical explanations. But the pattern is there once you know to look for it." Thomas had gone pale. 47 people, over 15 years. That's 3 murders a year, on average. The legal term would be medical manslaughter at minimum, serial murder if prosecutors want to go that route. Rita pulled up another screen. But here's the thing that makes this prosecutable. Shaw documented everything. He kept records like he was proud of it, or like he never imagined anyone would find them. There are notations about which medication combinations worked best to simulate disease progression, which symptoms to create to justify hospice transfer, even financial calculations about optimal patient turnover to maximize grant funding. He treated it like a business, Noah said quietly. People died and he treated it like a business problem to optimize. Exactly. Which makes these documents incredibly damning. This isn't a doctor making tragic mistakes. This is systematic, calculated fraud and murder for profit. Rita looked at Serena. The question is what we do with this. Give it to the FBI and hope they act fast? Go to the media and force public pressure? Both? Both, Serena said immediately. FBI for the legal case, media for the court of public opinion. Shaw's been controlling the narrative for too long. Time to change that. The media will ask how we obtained these files. We need a story that holds up. We tell them a whistleblower came forward, someone with access to Shaw's records who was disturbed by what they saw. We protect the source. That's standard journalistic practice. Let Shaw's lawyers scream about it. By the time they unravel who and how, the documents will be public record and the damage will be done. Thomas spoke up. And the FBI? They'll want to know how we got them too. We tell them the truth, that private investigators hired by my foundation discovered improperly secured documents during a legitimate security assessment. If Shaw wants to argue that we somehow planted 47 fake patient files with 15 years of documentation, let him try. The burden of proof is on him at that point. Mason was nodding slowly. It could work. The timing matters, though. We need to move fast before Shaw realizes the documents are compromised. Once he knows, he'll start spinning, claiming they're fake or fabricated or taken out of context. How fast can we move? Serena asked Rita. I can have full verification done by 9 a.m., complete forensic analysis cross-referenced with public records, ready for professional scrutiny. Then at 9:05, we go to the FBI. At 9:30, we go to the media. By noon, Shaw's face will be on every news channel in the country, and this time the story won't be about a grieving family making accusations. It'll be about documented evidence of serial medical murder. They worked through the dawn, Rita verifying documents while Mason coordinated with Angela and the rest of his team to lock down security. If Shaw figured out what had happened, if he tried to retaliate, they needed to be ready. Noah called Mrs. Chen to check on Lily, keeping his voice steady as he asked how she'd slept, whether she'd remembered to take her morning medications, whether she'd drawn any new butterflies. She's asking about you, Mrs. Chen said gently. When you're coming home. I told her soon, but Noah, she's getting worse. Yesterday she couldn't remember my name, called me the nice lady. I don't think we have much time. I know. I'm doing everything I can. Tell her I love her. Tell her Daddy's fighting for her. I tell her every day. But Noah, what if it's not enough? What if even stopping Shaw doesn't save her? Then at least she'll know I tried. That matters. It has to matter. He hung up before his voice could break. Serena was watching him, her expression unreadable. How long does Lily have? She asked quietly. Weeks, maybe days. NDS progression is unpredictable, especially in children. Noah swallowed hard. I'm going to lose her. Whether we win or lose against Shaw, I'm going to lose my daughter. We're going to find her real treatment, not Shaw's fraud. Real research, real doctors, real hope. I promise you that. Don't make promises you can't keep. I don't. Serena's voice was iron. Once we destroy Shaw, once his fraud is exposed, legitimate NDS researchers will get the funding and attention they deserve. Your daughter will have access to actual trials, actual treatments. It might not save her, but it'll give her a chance. That's more than Shaw ever offered. At 9 a.m., Agent Morrison arrived at Rita's office with Agent Chen and 2 additional FBI personnel. They listened as Rita walked them through the documents, her presentation clinical and devastating. Patient names matched to death certificates, financial records showing patterns of billing fraud, Shaw's handwritten notes documenting deliberate medication interactions designed to hasten death. The evidence mounted like stones building a wall, each piece supporting the others, creating a structure too solid to knock down. "Where did you obtain these documents?" Morrison asked when Rita finished. Private investigators conducting a security assessment discovered them unsecured at a property associated with Dr. Shaw. As mandatory reporters aware of potential criminal activity, they documented and reported their findings to my client, who immediately contacted your office. That's convenient. That's the truth. Whether you choose to believe it or prosecute based on it is your decision. But the documents are authentic. I can prove that beyond any doubt. What you do with authenticated evidence of serial murder is up to you." Morrison and Chen exchanged one of their wordless communications. Then Morrison turned to Serena. "We'll need the originals, and full cooperation from everyone involved in obtaining them. You'll have it. Whatever you need, whenever you need it. I want Shaw in prison for the rest of his life." "So do we. But Ms. Halbrook, I need you to understand something. Even with this evidence, Shaw's lawyers are good enough to drag this out for years. There will be motions to suppress, arguments about chain of custody, expert witnesses contradicting our expert witnesses. This isn't a quick win. I'm not looking for quick. I'm looking for certain. Build an unbeatable case. Take whatever time it needs. Shaw's reputation is already destroyed. The media coverage will see to that. I can wait for the legal system to catch up." At 9:45, Karen Reeves from the Philadelphia Inquirer published her follow-up story online. The headline read, "New documents reveal decades of medical fraud. Dr. Shaw linked to 47 patient deaths." The article included excerpts from the files, carefully redacted to protect patient privacy, but damning enough to leave no doubt. Shaw's handwritten notes, his calculations about optimal patient turnover, his spreadsheet of accelerated deaths. By 10 a.m., it was the lead story on every major news network. Cable news devoted entire segments to it, medical ethicists and legal experts weighing in, other journalists racing to verify and expand the story. Shaw's previous defenders went silent or issued carefully worded statements about how they'd been misled. The medical institutions that had supported him began quietly distancing themselves. Shaw's lawyer, Robert Kellerman, held another press conference at 11. This time he looked less confident, more defensive. He questioned the authenticity of the documents, suggested they might be fabricated, threatened legal action against everyone involved in their publication. But his threats sounded hollow. The evidence was too detailed, too specific, too consistent with Shaw's known activities to be fake. And then, at 11:30, something unexpected happened. A woman called into a live news broadcast. Her name was Linda Cortez. She'd been Shaw's research director, and she was ready to talk. They watched the interview in Rita's conference room, everyone frozen as Cortez described what she'd witnessed over 5 years working for Shaw. The falsified data, the patient deaths that seemed suspicious but were explained away, the financial irregularities she'd reported to Shaw, only to be told they were necessary for the greater good of research. She'd left 6 months ago because she couldn't live with the guilt anymore. Shaw had paid her to stay quiet, given her a generous severance and an NDA. But watching the news coverage, watching families learn their loved ones might have been murdered, she couldn't stay silent. "I have copies of everything," she said on live television. "Every file Shaw kept, every financial record, every piece of correspondence about the fraud. I made backups before I left because I knew someday this would matter. I'm giving all of it to the FBI. I should have done it 6 months ago. I'm sorry I didn't." Mason let out a breath. That's ballgame. Shaw can argue our documents were illegally obtained. He can't argue against his own research director turning over files she had legitimate access to. Cortez just gave the FBI everything they need for an airtight case. "Why did she wait?" Thomas asked. "If she knew 6 months ago, why wait until now?" Fear, guilt, the same reasons whistleblowers always wait. They're hoping someone else will do it, hoping the problem will resolve itself, hoping they won't have to sacrifice their career and reputation. Serena's voice was understanding, not judgmental. But she came forward. That's what matters. Noah was staring at the television, at Cortez's face twisted with remorse and determination. She's going to lose everything. Shaw's lawyers will destroy her. Breach of NDA, theft of confidential documents, maybe even conspiracy charges. She knows that, and she's doing it anyway. "Because some things matter more than self-preservation," Serena said quietly. She's choosing to be able to live with herself. That takes courage. The FBI arrested Shaw at 2 p.m. News helicopters captured the moment. Shaw in handcuffs being led from his rental house. His expression no longer dignified or wounded, but simply shocked. Like he couldn't believe this was actually happening. Like he'd been so certain of his invincibility that the reality of consequences had never seemed possible. He was charged with 47 counts of involuntary manslaughter, multiple counts of fraud, conspiracy, and practicing medicine in a manner dangerous to the public. Bail was set at $10 million. Shaw's lawyers immediately argued it was excessive. The judge denied the motion, citing flight risk given Shaw's demonstrated attempts to hide evidence and flee the state. Shaw would await trial in prison. The news spread like wildfire. By evening, Shaw's name was trending worldwide. Medical boards announced investigations. Universities where he'd taught began reviewing his research. Journals that had published his work issued statements about retraction processes. The Shaw Institute officially closed, its remaining patients transferred to legitimate facilities with legitimate care. Thomas's phone rang constantly with interview requests. He granted 3, one to Patricia Wong, who'd given him his first platform, one to a medical podcast that focused on patient advocacy, and one to a victim support organization that wanted to highlight the importance of trusting patients when they reported adverse effects. In each interview, Thomas spoke with the same clear-eyed honesty. He talked about Shaw's betrayal, about the terror of feeling yourself disappear while your doctor assured you it was normal, about the importance of fighting for truth even when the system seems stacked against you. And at the end of each interview, he said the same thing. This isn't just about Shaw. It's about a system that allowed him to operate for 15 years. We need to fix that system, or there will be another Shaw. And another. And another. The public response was overwhelming. Donations poured into NDS research foundations, legitimate ones, carefully vetted. Patient advocacy groups reported surges in membership. Medical schools announced new ethics curricula focused on the power dynamics between doctors and patients. It wasn't justice, not yet, not completely, but it was change. 3 weeks after Shaw's arrest, Serena stood in a hospital room in Boston, watching a 7-year-old girl with dark curls receive her first infusion of an experimental NDS treatment. Real treatment, developed by real researchers at MIT, funded by a grant from Serena's foundation. The trial had been in development for years, delayed by funding shortfalls and lack of public awareness. Shaw's exposure had changed that. Suddenly, NDS research was a priority. Suddenly, there was money and attention and hope. Noah sat beside Lily's bed, holding her hand, telling her stories about butterflies while the medication dripped through her IV. Lily's eyes were bright with confusion more often than clarity now, her vocabulary reduced to simple words, her memories scattered. But she knew her father. She smiled when he spoke. And when the nurse asked if the infusion hurt, Lily shook her head and said clearly, "The nice medicine doesn't hurt. The bad medicine hurt. This is nice medicine." Noah's eyes filled with tears. He looked up at Serena standing in the doorway. "Thank you," he mouthed. She nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. This might not work. The trial was phase 2, still experimental, with no guarantees. Lily might not survive, but she had a chance now. A real chance. That was more than Shaw had ever given anyone. Thomas appeared beside her, walking without assistance now, his recovery remarkable though incomplete. "How is she?" "Stable." The doctors are cautiously optimistic. Her brain scans show less active degeneration than expected. It's too early to say if the treatment is working, but it's not making her worse. That's something. That's everything. Thomas watched Noah and Lily through the window. "He saved both of us, you know. If he hadn't figured out what Shaw was doing, if he hadn't been brave enough to run screaming across that plaza, we'd both be dead. He's the real hero of this story." Heroes come in unexpected forms. Janitors with shredded documents, sisters who refuse to give up, brothers who tell uncomfortable truths on television. Serena took Thomas's hand. "How are you feeling, really?" "Tired. Confused sometimes. I still forget words, forget faces. NDS hasn't stopped, but it's slower now without Shaw's poison accelerating it. Dr. Okonkwo thinks I might have years instead of months. That's enough to matter. Enough to finish some sculpture pieces I've been planning. Enough to see justice done." Shaw's trial starts in 8 months. I'll be there. Front row. I want him to see my face every day and know that he failed. He tried to kill me to hide his fraud, and instead I'm the reason he got caught. That's its own kind of poetry. They stood together, watching Noah tell his daughter stories, watching Lily smile despite everything, watching hope persist in the face of terrible odds. Outside the window, Boston's skyline glittered in the afternoon sun. Life continuing, indifferent and beautiful, while people inside fought their private wars against disease and death and despair. Serena's phone buzzed. Text from Rita. Shaw's lawyers are trying to negotiate a plea deal. Prosecution is considering it. Thought you should know. She stepped into the hallway to call. Rita answered immediately. What kind of plea deal? 20 years on the fraud charges, manslaughter charges dropped. Shaw serves his time, loses his medical license permanently, and agrees never to practice medicine or conduct research again. In exchange, he provides testimony about other potential fraudulent researchers he's aware of. 20 years isn't enough, not for 47 deaths. I know. But the prosecution's worried about the manslaughter charges. Proving Shaw deliberately killed those patients is harder than proving fraud. Medical experts can argue about appropriate care standards, whether the medications were reasonable choices given patient conditions, whether deaths were truly hastened or just inevitable. The fraud charges are airtight. The murder charges are complicated. So they want the guaranteed conviction rather than risk an acquittal on the bigger charges. Exactly. And honestly, 20 years for a 62-year-old man is effectively a life sentence. He'll be 82 when he gets out. Too old to restart a career, too old to do much damage. It accomplishes the goal. Serena thought about Thomas, about Noah, about 47 families who'd lost people they loved. What do the victims' families think? Mixed. Some want the trial, want Shaw to face full accountability in public. Others just want it over, want him locked away so they can move on. There's no consensus. What does Thomas want? I haven't asked him yet. I wanted to talk to you first. Serena returned to the hospital room. Thomas and Noah were talking quietly, their voices blending with the beep of monitors and the soft hum of medical equipment. She waited until they noticed her, until they read her expression and went still. Shaw's lawyers are offering a plea deal, 20 years. He admits to fraud, loses his license forever, testifies against other corrupt researchers. But the murder charges go away. The silence stretched. Then Noah spoke, his voice barely audible. Will he actually serve 20 years? Or will there be parole, good behavior, early release? Minimum 15 years before parole eligibility. But there's no guarantee. The system protects people like Shaw. Noah looked down at Lily, at her small hand in his. He killed 47 people, and he'll serve maybe 15 years. That's 4 months per victim, 4 months per life destroyed. That's not justice. No, Serena agreed. It's not. But it's certain. A trial could last years, could end in acquittal if Shaw's lawyers are as good as we think. This way, he definitely goes to prison. Definitely loses everything he built. That counts for something. Thomas was quiet, his artist's hands clasped together, his expression distant. Finally, he said, I want him to admit it. That's what matters to me. Not the years or the charges or the legal details. I want Shaw to stand up in court and admit what he did. Admit he lied. Admit he hurt people deliberately. I want his confession on public record so there's no ambiguity, no room for future rehabilitation of his reputation. Can the plea deal give us that? Yes. Full allocution required. He has to admit to the specific acts of fraud, the falsified research, the misuse of funds. It'll be part of the official court record. Then I can live with it. I'd rather have his confession and 15 guaranteed years than risk him walking free on a technicality. They both looked at Noah. He stared at his daughter for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Okay. Tell them we'll accept the plea deal, but I want to be there when he admits it. I want to look him in the eye when he says out loud what he did. The plea hearing happened 6 weeks later in a Philadelphia courtroom packed with victims' families, journalists, and medical professionals who wanted to witness the fall of a man they'd once respected. Shaw wore prison orange instead of his white coat, his silver hair unkempt, his distinguished face hollow. He looked like what he was, a broken man facing the consequences of his choices. The judge read the charges. Shaw's lawyer confirmed his client's plea, and then Shaw himself had to speak, had to detail every act of fraud, every falsified result, every misused dollar. His voice was flat, mechanical, like he was reciting someone else's crimes. But the words were his. The confession was his. I falsified research data to secure continued funding. I reported positive results that did not exist. I administered medications to patients that were not part of legitimate treatment protocols. I prioritized my career and financial gain over patient welfare. I am responsible for the deaths of patients who trusted me to care for them. The courtroom was silent except for soft crying from some of the families. Shaw never looked up, never met anyone's eyes. When he finished, the judge asked if anyone wished to make a victim impact statement. 15 people stood. One by one, they approached the microphone and told the court about the people they'd lost. Mothers, fathers, siblings, children. People who'd trusted Shaw with their final hopes, who died believing they were being cared for when they were being murdered. The statements lasted 3 hours. Shaw sat through all of them, head bowed, hands clasped. When the last statement finished, the judge turned to Shaw. "Do you have anything to say to these families?" Shaw stood slowly. For a moment, Serena thought he wouldn't speak. Then he said, voice barely audible, "I'm sorry. It doesn't change what I did. It doesn't bring anyone back. But I'm sorry. It wasn't enough. Could never be enough. But it was something." The judge sentenced him to 20 years in federal prison, no eligibility for parole before 15. Shaw was led away in handcuffs. The families filed out slowly, some crying, some grimly satisfied, all carrying the weight of loss that no verdict could truly address. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Serena gave a brief statement about justice being served and her foundation's commitment to supporting legitimate NDS research. Thomas declined to speak but nodded to the cameras, his presence itself a statement. Alive, recovering, victorious. Noah stood with Lily in his arms, her head on his shoulder, and said simply, "Today my daughter has hope because a bad man admitted he was bad. That's enough. We can start healing now." 6 months later, on a cool autumn morning, Serena stood in her brother's sculpture studio and watched him work clay for the first time in a year. His hands moved slowly, carefully, muscle memory returning in fits and starts. The piece taking shape on the wheel wasn't perfect. The symmetry was off, the walls uneven. But it was beautiful anyway, because it existed, because Thomas was here, creating, refusing to let disease or Shaw's betrayal define his final chapter. "What is it?" she asked. Still deciding. Maybe hope. Maybe survival. Maybe just clay being clay. Thomas smiled, his hands never stopping their work. "Does it matter? I'm making something. 6 months ago, Shaw had me convinced I'd never make anything again. Turned out he was wrong about that too." Her phone rang. "Mason," she answered. "Turn on the news, Channel 7? She found a television in Thomas's office. The screen showed a medical facility in Baltimore with FBI agents leading people out in handcuffs. The chyron read, "Second major medical fraud case uncovered. Shaw's testimony leads to additional arrests." Shaw had kept his word. From prison, he'd provided information about other researchers he knew were falsifying data, taking money for treatments that didn't exist, exploiting desperate patients for profit. The FBI had been quietly investigating for months. Today, 5 more doctors were arrested. Tomorrow, who knew how many more would fall? Shaw's testimony is basically a roadmap to corruption in medical research, Mason said over the phone. He kept records on other people's fraud, probably as insurance or blackmail material. Now the FBI has all of it. This is going to be years of prosecutions. Good. Burn it all down. Build something better. Spoken like a woman who's already started building, Mason's voice held approval. How's your foundation doing? We funded 12 new NDS research projects in the last 6 months. Real projects with real scientists doing real work. We've also established oversight protocols, independent verification of all results, surprise audits, mandatory transparency. No more Shaws slipping through the cracks. And Noah's daughter? Serena smiled. Lily's in the trial. It's month 4. She's not cured, but she's stable. She remembered her father's birthday last week without being reminded. She drew a butterfly and labeled it correctly. Small victories, but they're victories. That's good. That's really good. Mason paused. And you? How are you? Tired. Angry still sometimes. But okay. Better than okay, actually. Shaw tried to destroy me. Instead, he gave me purpose. I spent 20 years building a company. Now I'm building something that matters more. Shaw lost. We won. That's enough. She hung up and returned to Thomas's studio. He was still working the clay, lost in the rhythm of creation. On the wall behind him hung framed newspaper clippings, headlines from Shaw's arrest, his conviction, the follow-up cases. Thomas had refused to take them down when Serena suggested it. I need to remember, he'd said, not just what Shaw did, but that we fought back, that we won. Memory's a tricky thing when you have NDS. I'm keeping physical reminders of the victories while I still can. Now Serena watched her brother work and thought about memory, about justice, about the long arc of accountability. Shaw would spend his final years in prison. Lily might live to see adulthood. Thomas was creating art again. 47 families had closure. Hundreds of future patients would be protected by reforms Shaw's exposure had triggered. It wasn't perfect. Justice never was. But it was enough. On the work table beside Thomas's wheel, Serena noticed a sketch, a preliminary design for a larger sculpture. It showed 5 figures holding hands in a circle. She recognized them: herself, Thomas, Noah, Lily, and Mason. Underneath, Thomas had written a title in his careful artist's script: The Ones Who Survived. You're making that? She asked, pointing. Thomas glanced at the sketch and smiled. Eventually, when I'm stronger. It's important, I think, to remember that we didn't just survive Shaw, we survived together. That's the part worth memorializing. Serena's throat tightened. We should add someone else. Linda Cortez. She came forward when she didn't have to. She's part of this too. 6 figures then, and maybe a butterfly for Lily. Thomas returned to his clay, shaping it with infinite patience. We'll call it The Ones Who Fought. That's more accurate anyway. We didn't just survive, we fought back. That matters. It does. Outside, autumn leaves drifted past the studio windows, gold and amber and rust. The seasons changed, indifferent to human drama. But inside, a man who'd been dying was creating art. A billionaire who'd almost lost everything had found something worth more than wealth. A janitor's daughter was drawing butterflies and remembering words. A security chief was protecting people who mattered instead of just protecting assets. Shaw had tried to build an empire on lies and death. Instead, he'd accidentally built something better. A community of survivors who refused to accept that bad people always won. They'd fought. They'd persisted. They'd won. Not perfectly. Not completely. But enough. And sometimes, on the worst days, turned into better ones. Enough was everything. 3 years later, Lily Calder, age 10, still fighting, but fighting from a position of strength, stood in a museum gallery surrounded by her drawings of butterflies. Her father stood beside her, older and grayer, but smiling as visitors admired his daughter's work. The exhibition was called Memory in Flight and featured Lily's art alongside other works by young artists living with neurological conditions. Thomas Holbrook's sculpture, The Ones Who Fought, stood in the gallery's center, 6 bronze figures holding hands in a circle, a butterfly perched on one figure's outstretched palm. It had taken him 2 years to complete. NDS had progressed, stolen more of his skills, forced him to relearn techniques he'd known for decades, but he'd finished it. The sculpture was his final major work. He'd announced his retirement last month, his hands too unsteady now for the detail work he demanded of himself. But this piece existed. Would exist long after Thomas was gone, long after Shaw was forgotten, long after all of them had moved on to whatever came next. Serena stood in front of the sculpture and read the plaque. Dedicated to everyone who fights for truth when the system fights for silence. You are not alone. You are not forgotten. Your fight matters. Noah approached with Lily, who was wearing a dress covered in butterflies. Her mother's favorite pattern, Noah had told Serena once. Lily looked at the sculpture with the serious expression of a child who understood more than she could articulate. That's us, she said, pointing. Daddy and me and Thomas and Serena and Mason and Miss Linda? That's right, Butterfly. That's us. We won? Noah hesitated, then nodded. Yeah, we won. Good. Lily turned back to her own drawings, satisfied with that answer, ready to move on to the next thing. Serena watched them walk away and thought about what winning meant. Shaw was in prison. Lily was alive. Thomas had created beauty despite disease. Reforms had protected other patients. The system had changed, fractionally, incrementally, but changed. Was it enough? Maybe not. Maybe there would always be another Shaw, another fraud, another fight. Maybe justice was never complete, only ongoing. But today, in this gallery, with autumn light streaming through windows and butterflies drawn by a child who'd survived what should have killed her, it felt like enough. Serena's phone buzzed. Text from Rita. New case. Medical researcher in Chicago. Suspicious patient outcomes. Interested? She smiled, typed back a single word. Always, and returned her attention to the gallery, to the sculpture, to the butterflies in flight. The fight continued. It always would. But so did they. And that made all the difference.